I thought I had it all. A thriving law career, a beautiful wife, and a life that seemed picture perfect. But everything unraveled the night I drove to the library to surprise Sonia, only to find it locked and dark. My hands shook as I checked the tracker app, revealing her location at the Radisson Blu. A cold dread filled my chest. Who was she meeting? I parked my old Bronco near her sleek BMW, nudging her car just enough to leave a mark, a silent warning. Later that night, she came home with excuses and lies. That was the moment I knew. My marriage was a house of cards, ready to collapse. My name is James Tremaine, and I am a lawyer and a main partner at my law firm, Tremaine, Anderson, and Dowling. I have been married to my wife, Sonia, for 14 years, and she works at a finance company in the city. I thought our marriage was happy, but they say the husband often finds out last when things go wrong. We run a medium-sized law firm that does well. We occasionally take on free cases and help the local archdiocese with legal advice. Not long ago, I started to suspect that Sonia might be unfaithful. It seemed like she was regularly meeting with a colleague, Marcus Blaine, on Tuesday and Thursday nights, and maybe on Fridays too. I was almost ready to hire a private investigator to look into it. But first, her birthday was coming up, and since I cared for her, I wanted to get her something special. Sonia had always wanted a new 5G smartphone, so I decided to buy her one with all the features. It even came with a hefty instruction manual. I struggled to understand many parts of it, even though I am quite tech-savvy. The part that caught my eye was about a tracker app, but my old phone didn't support it. I decided to get a less expensive 5G phone for myself so I could load the app. When I gave her the new phone, she was thrilled to be the first in her office to have it. I hoped for more appreciation than a quick thank you, but that was all I received. One Tuesday night, while she was at a library committee meeting, I thought I would surprise her with some drinks, dinner, and dancing. I drove to the library to pick her up around 8 p.m., but the place was dark and locked up tight. She usually got home around 9 o'clock or 9:30. I saw the security guard and went over to ask about the meeting. He looked at me confused and said, "What meeting?" I was shocked and asked if it had been moved. He replied, sounding baffled. Something felt off. I tried calling her cell from my new phone, the one she didn't know about, but it went straight to voicemail. That's when I remembered the tracking app on her phone. I opened it up and a blinking icon appeared on the screen. When I tapped to show the address, it pointed to the North Loop Radisson Blu. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. I went home and switched my car for my old Ford Bronco. I quickly drove to the fancy hotel, parked my car, and went inside to ask about the city library committee meeting. Please don't judge me. I've been to college and law school, but I don't always catch on quickly, I thought. The man at the front desk seemed to know what was going on, but he acted very professional. "I'm sorry, sir," he replied. "There isn't a city library committee meeting here, is there?" I asked. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out. I got back into my Bronco and started feeling uneasy. I started the engine, backed out, and drove around the parking lot for about 5 minutes until I spotted her 3-year-old BMW. I thought to myself, this is frustrating. I carefully parked beside her car, engaged my 4-wheel drive, and nudged it gently. Feeling satisfied, I backed away and headed home. As I turned onto the street, I noticed her leaving the hotel with Marcus Blaine. At least I knew who would be responsible for this situation. When I got home, I parked in my side of the driveway and left her side clear. I checked my bumper. There was just a small scuff on it. I grabbed a rag, some rubbing compound, and a can of black paint. 5 minutes later, it looked as good as new. I went inside, poured myself a drink, and turned on the Yankees game. About 5 minutes later, she walked in looking upset. "How was the meeting, hun?" I asked. She glared at me and mumbled something about her car. I sat up, trying not to laugh. "Are you okay?" Yes, I'm fine," she replied. "Let's go take a look," I suggested, grabbing a flashlight. We headed outside to check her car. After a few minutes of "oh no" and "oh no, honey," I asked if she had gotten the police officer's card so we could get a report for the insurance claim. No," she said uncertainly. "Why not?" I asked, surprised and shifting into serious mode. It's just a little dent, she mumbled. Honey, it's a BMW. The door frame is bent, the window is broken, and the door is pretty much done for, I replied. I was too upset. I just wanted to come home, she said quietly. We'll have to cover the costs ourselves. I knew she hadn't called the police because there would be a report indicating when and where the accident occurred, and it definitely wasn't at the library. Fine, I'll pay for it. It's my car, she replied, sounding frustrated. The atmosphere at home became quite cold for a while. The next day, I took some time off work and brought her car to the dealership. I gave them her work phone number, set up for her to get a rental, and told them to reach out to her about the cost. After that, I went to a local store that sells surveillance equipment. I bought a few voice-activated recorders and motion-activated cameras. I also got a monitor for our home phone. When I got home, I placed one camera in the living room, another in the main bedroom, one in the bathroom, and one in the kitchen. I connected the phone monitor to the landline and attached a voice recorder in the bedroom, living room, and kitchen too. I didn't think Sonia would bring him to our house, but it was all set up just in case I needed a private investigator. I went to my home office and couldn't help but cry. Sonia, I stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom of Suite 512, admiring my reflection. Marcus was in the shower and I was drying off and brushing my hair. Not too bad for 34, I thought with a smile. I remembered when I first met James, my husband. He made me happy for a time, but it was never deep love, even though he cared for me a lot. I have a degree in financial management, and he has a law degree, so our marriage was more of a partnership. When he proposed, I accepted. We got married, bought a house, and started thinking about having kids, but James didn't know about my plans and the steps I took to avoid having children. I wasn't ready for kids at all, and while love was missing, I found ways to be with others. Then I met Marcus Blaine. Marcus is kind and thoughtful, and we decided to be exclusive. He asked me to stop seeing my husband, and I thought it was only fair that he did the same. He had 3 kids, so he wasn't worried about the lack of attention from his wife. Marcus and I also have plans for February of next year, on Valentine's Day. I picked up my lace underwear and put it on, followed by a bra that hardly covered much. I slipped on a satin blouse and then rolled on some charcoal-colored tights. I didn't want any runs in them. I found the pencil skirt I had set aside earlier and put it on, smoothing it over my hips and zipping it up. After that, I put on my high heels. When I stood in front of the mirror, I said quietly, "Perfect. He won't suspect a thing." Just then, Marcus came out of the bathroom and began getting dressed. As he buttoned his shirt and smiled at me, he tucked it in and grabbed his tie. I walked up to him with a glass of wine and kissed him softly. While he tied his tie, I reapplied my lip gloss. "Come on, we need to head back to our families," I said. "Sure thing," he replied. He finished tying his tie and put on his suit jacket. "Same time Thursday?" he asked. "Definitely," I said with a smile. We walked out of the hotel room together and headed to the elevator. After going down to the lobby, we crossed to the revolving front door and made our way to our cars. As I approached my BMW, I noticed something was wrong. My heart sank as I saw the damage on the left side of my car. "Oh no!" I exclaimed. "Look at this mess!" Marcus heard me and ran over. He looked shocked as he dashed to his Lexus parked nearby. "Thank goodness my car is okay," he said. I shot him an annoyed look and then looked back at my car. "Are you going to call the police?" he asked. "Are you kidding me?" I snapped. "What would I tell them? That I was at the Radisson for a meeting? That's what the report would say." I sighed, knowing I had to find a way to explain everything without involving the police. I thought about different excuses, but none seemed good enough. After Marcus left, I wrapped a towel around myself, thinking about the fun times I'd had with Sonia. She had plans for us, and I felt ready to leave my marriage whenever she was ready. I dried my hair and got dressed while watching her put on her pantyhose, straighten the seams, and put on her skirt and heels. She came over with a glass of wine and watched as I tied my tie. She urged me to hurry, and I couldn't help but smile, looking forward to our next meeting. I grabbed my suit jacket, took her arm, and we walked toward the door. As I opened it, I asked, Same time Thursday? Absolutely, she said cheerfully. We walked together to the elevator and went down to the lobby. We stepped through the revolving door into the night and walked to our cars. Suddenly, Sonia started to panic. "Oh, no!" she yelled. I quickly ran to my Lexus, feeling relieved that it was undamaged. Sonia looked at me with frustration as she tried to calm herself down. "Should I call the police for a report?" I asked. "Why don't we just tell him we're at a hotel together?" She shot back, regaining her composure. "No, I will handle this myself," she said quietly. I thought to myself, thank goodness I don't have to talk to Alicia about this. Sonia was right, though. The police would record everything, and I doubted her husband was as unaware as she believed. "You don't think James is involved in this, do you?" I asked. She looked at me, and I could tell she thought I was not thinking clearly. "James doesn't act aggressively. He would probably hire someone to look into us by now," she replied. She was somewhat correct. James. On Wednesday, I went to work and settled in to learn what had happened the day before. Most things were already taken care of, and I was planning to reach out to our investigator about surveillance on my wife and her partner when my assistant buzzed in. "Boss, we have a situation. A man just came in with a personal issue, and there's no one else to talk to him. Do you want to step in for a bit?" she asked. I didn't know it at that moment, but this meeting would clarify everything and help me solve my problems. "Let him in, Janine." I cleared my desk and stood up to welcome the man. He entered my office, looking defeated. "My assistant has gathered your information," I said as Janine placed a folder on my desk. "Thomas Jalez. Can I call you Thomas? What else can you tell me besides what's in this folder?" "I've been married for 16 years. I found out my wife was cheating on me with her boss. I think it was just a one-time thing. I lost my temper, went to confront him, and I was ready to hurt him. I had a gun and was going to use it. When I faced him, he was getting out of his car at work. I pointed the gun at him, and he looked terrified." He paused for a moment, staring at the table. "I lost my courage and just planned to tell him to stop seeing my wife," he continued, his voice rising in anger. "That man just laughed at me and called me names. I lost control and shot him. Twice." He took a breath. "I left right after. That was about an hour ago. I drove around, unsure of what to do. I was moments away from turning myself in when I remembered a friend saying your firm helped his family before. So, I came here. I feel trapped." I used the intercom to call Janine and told her to contact Pete, our investigator. 15 minutes later, Pete Donovan arrived. "Pete, this is Mr. Thomas Jalez, and he needs our help," I said. I turned to Thomas. "What do you want to do about your wife?" "Divorce," he replied simply. "All right, Pete, here's what we'll do. Begin surveillance on his wife without any limits. Also, find out what happened to the boss." "He was injured at work, shot twice, and there's surveillance on him," Tremaine said. "Got it, Mr. Tremaine," the man replied before leaving to handle his tasks. Tremaine turned to Jalez. "Now, Mr. Jalez, let's talk about the weapon. Where did you get it? What kind was it? Was it yours, and what happened to it after?" "Remember, attorney-client privilege applies here," Tremaine added. "I'm recording everything, and I need you to be honest. If I'm going to defend you, surprises from the district attorney are the last thing we need." Jalez shifted uncomfortably before replying. "I'm a manager at a shipping company near the docks. I know someone who has connections, a guy who can get you a gun, cash only, no questions asked. I bought a 9mm Glock from him at a bar. After I used it, I threw it into the river far from the docks." "Why not just drop it in the harbor near your workplace?" Tremaine asked. "I didn't want to risk being seen. The guy who sold me the gun suggested I wear a disguise if I ever needed to use it, to make identification harder. So I wore a mask. I'll handle the rest. For now, go home and focus on cleaning up your tracks. Don't leave anything that could lead back to you." Jal nodded before leaving. Tremaine's mind raced with ideas, and he felt confident things were starting to take shape. He would see Jalez tomorrow to follow up. For now, he tried to push aside personal concerns, like the unresolved situation with Sonia. That morning, around 10 a.m., Tremaine had his assistant Janine look into the public incorporation records for Haslow Corporation, where Jalez's wife worked. She was part of the executive secretary team alongside several other women. Tremaine had also gotten the name of the man who sold Giles the gun Myron Fleming and the bar where they met. The word disguise kept echoing in his mind as he started preparing a plan. Later in the day, around 4:45 p.m., Tremaine received a text from his wife. She mentioned attending a cancer committee meeting at Mercy Hospital North and said she'd be home by 10 p.m. Tremaine felt uneasy about her vague explanation, especially since she hadn't even called. At 5:30, his suspicion got the better of him. He turned on his new phone and used its locator app. It showed her at the Radisson Hotel. He made a mental note to speak to Pete about improving surveillance when they next met. Just as Tremaine was about to leave the office, the phone rang. It was Pete. "You still at the office?" Pete asked. "Yes," Tremaine replied. "Turn on Channel 7. Quick. Stay put, I'm heading over." Tremaine switched on the TV and tuned into Channel 7. There, the crime reporter Chris Trelawney stood outside Mercy Hospital North, speaking about a breaking story. Dirk Warnes was shot and seriously hurt when he arrived at work. He is an assistant administrative supervisor at Haslow Corporation. He was quickly taken to Mercy Hospital North for surgery. After his operation, around 12:15 p.m., two female secretaries from Haslow Corporation tried to visit him, along with Mr. Warnes' wife. Three more secretaries, who also worked for Mr. Warnes, came to see him as well. A disagreement broke out when two of the single women found out Mr. Warnes was married. None of the secretarial staff realized that Mr. Warnes had been unfaithful. Just then, Pete came in, looking pleased. "Ah, you're at the exciting part," he chuckled. "It seems Mrs. Giles was the latest person Mr. Warnes was interested in. No one, including Mrs. Warnes, knew about his actions with the secretaries." Pete had already put a watch on Mrs. Giles and Mr. Warnes as soon as he learned what happened. His associate came to the hospital shortly after Doreen Giles showed up and shared the news with Pete. "Boss, do you want the good news or the better news?" he asked. "Good first," Pete replied. When the office heard about the incident, two of the women rushed to the hospital. The rest stayed behind, arguing with each other except for Doreen. She stayed quiet and listened. After a while, the two single women left, and about 20 minutes later, Doreen took her purse and keys and hurried out the door. Pete took a breath to continue. Jake followed her, risking several tickets to stay near her. She arrived just as Channel 7 was getting ready to report. She got there about 30 minutes after his wife. When she walked in, chaos was everywhere. Pete shook his head before sharing more. She stayed at the edge and listened. When there was a break in the noise, she walked through the crowd and punched him in the stomach. "Pig!" she shouted. That sparked a fight, and soon all the ladies were arguing, pulling hair, and shouting at each other. He paused. "If you ever find yourself in trouble with women like that, stay away. They can be really fierce." But Doreen got her part in and then left. Jake followed her home, and he's still outside. Her husband just arrived about 15 minutes ago. He smiled again. "Now for the big news. We managed to get all their faces and check them against DMV records. We know who they are, where they live, and their marital status. And the police have nothing. They have no description, and the gun was linked to 3 other unsolved cases. They are just going in circles. I passed all the information to Chris Trelawney and then came here to call you. Have Jake pick up Mr. and Mrs. Giles and bring them to me right after I call them." I dialed Giles' number, and he answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello?" Tom said. "Mr. Giles, this is James Tremaine. I would like you and your wife to come here right now for a meeting. One of our investigators is outside, and he will take you to our offices and bring you home afterwards. I believe this is best for both of you." They arrived about 20 minutes later. I spoke to Tom first and told him that his wife didn't know anything about his situation. It seemed the police didn't either. "Your wife was fooled by this guy. She's only guilty of being kind. It only happened once, and according to my investigator, she stood up to him at the hospital. I don't know what you both talked about at home, but I have a suggestion. Hold off on the divorce for now and take a 30-day break, separately if needed, then go for counseling together. We can still start the divorce later if you want to, but I believe that most problems come from poor communication. This way, we won't make as much money, but I cannot move forward without letting you know about other options." These options also include filing a lawsuit against their company for a large sum, claiming they didn't enforce their rules. We could add claims for emotional distress and tell them we might go to court. I think they might settle. Once you receive the money, have your wife resign and move forward with your life. Tom thought for a moment and said it sounded promising. He continued, "When I got home, she seemed upset, but after a few minutes, she got very emotional. She kept saying she was sorry and felt foolish, asking how I could even look at her. She mentioned that she wouldn't blame me if I wanted a divorce, and she wouldn't fight it. She only wanted her car so she could leave and find another job. She said she didn't deserve me, and it really hurt me. She kept saying she was sorry for hurting me, and that she still loved me." He said that was about the time I called, and he decided to take my advice and come in to talk. He laughed and said, "I'm worried she's getting dehydrated from all the crying. She even started hiccuping when we walked into the office." He then told me he thought my suggestion was a good idea, with a big sigh of relief. I could tell that he didn't want to lose his wife any more than she wanted to lose him. After discussing it with his wife, that's what they chose to do. He found her a hotel, but I heard that didn't last long. They couldn't stand being apart. They went to counseling for almost 2 months, and then they found out she was going to have a baby. Their lawsuit, the first of many against her company, brought them $327,000 because their branch decided to play hardball. The company found out about the situation and told everyone to settle, specifying how much they should pay. Warnes, who had been causing trouble, lost his job and then went through a divorce. We were fortunate enough to take on 2 divorce cases and 3 additional lawsuits against the company. The police interviewed Tom twice, the second time with a lawyer, but eventually decided to close the case. Overall, it was a satisfying outcome for just 2 months of work, right? A perfect ending, right? Not quite. There was more to come. I still had to deal with my situation involving Sonia, and things were about to get even more interesting. James. That Friday, I received a message from my wife saying she had a girls' night out for a bridal party and would be home late. I hadn't talked to Pete about what was going on, but I wasn't worried since I was trying to stay committed to my vows. Once I was sure she was out, I checked the app to see her location. She was on the other side of the airport, but then it stopped. The app showed a place called the Lucky Shamrock Bar and Grill. I noted the address and decided to go, dressed in jeans and a polo shirt. When I arrived, I noticed about 20 cars in the parking lot. Unsure about any surveillance cameras, I parked my truck about half a block away on the street. As I approached the entrance, I saw a neon sign that read, "Entertainment." I walked through the parking lot, looking for Sonia's rental car, which I found toward the back of the building. It was around 10 p.m., and she had been there for an hour. It must be busy inside, I thought. I entered the bar and found 7 men sitting and sipping their drinks, with no crowd of women and no sign of Sonia. I went to the bar and ordered a beer. After paying, I asked the bartender where everyone was. He pointed to the right, to a large man at a threshold without a door, just a beaded curtain. I waited and watched as waitresses made their way through the entrance every 15-20 minutes. As I was about to enter the other area, the big guy stopped me and said, "It's $50. I nodded, handed him $60, and said, "Keep the change." He motioned for me to go through. I walked down a long, dim hallway to another closed door. Another big guy was there, sitting on a stool. I gestured toward the door, and he shook his head, saying, "It's $50 just to look. If you want to join in, it will cost more." "Oh? How much more?" I asked. He listed the prices for different experiences. I began to feel uneasy. How do I know it's worth it? He mentioned that Sonia was the featured show for the night. I felt sick. "I'll check it out first," I decided, stepping into the viewing room to my right. It was dark and smoky, and I could see one of the waitresses leaving. The place felt run down. There were about 25 men in the room. On the left side, there was a long window that was 25 feet wide and 6 feet tall. The other side was really bright, with 4 cameras high up. Inside, there was a couch near the door and a raised platform in the middle. On the platform was a fancy mattress, and on it was a woman wearing only high heels and stockings. One man was very close to her, and another was beside her too. I realized I had found my wife. You know how they say once you see something, you can't forget it? What I saw will stay with me forever. I watched in shock as she seemed to enjoy herself. The man she was with showed strong feelings and stepped back, letting another man take his place. The other man made sounds that caught my attention, and in that moment, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and left the room. At the door, I told the guard I needed to go to the ATM, but I would be back. Once I was outside, I hurried to my truck. When I got halfway to it, my stomach turned, and I suddenly felt sick, throwing up until there was nothing left. When I reached my truck, I opened the door and tried to clean myself with a rag, but it was no use. I climbed in and drove home. I don't remember much about the drive, but when I finally realized where I was, I saw my garage door, and it looked dirty. That's when the tears started to fall. I felt like a child again, crying and hitting the steering wheel of my truck. I don't know how long I sat there. It felt like ages. Finally, I turned off the lights and the engine and went inside. I told myself that she would have to answer for this. I planned to talk to Pete on Monday and gather evidence about everything. I thought about threatening to expose what I knew and getting a divorce. I grabbed a bottle and took a big drink before I stumbled upstairs and stepped into the shower with my clothes on. After feeling sick again, I dried off and collapsed onto my bed, hoping to sleep. I woke up groggy, and as I looked at the clock radio, I realized it was 4:30 a.m. My wife was getting into bed beside me. She must have noticed me and said, "You really messed up last night, didn't you? You are such a weak fool." Then she turned off the light and rolled away. I thought to myself that tomorrow would be different. I would invite Pete to lunch, and then we would start making our plans. Sonia. I went to the Shamrock at my usual time and got everything ready for the night around 10 p.m. I changed my clothes in the ladies' room until I was just in my stockings and looked at myself in the mirror. I checked my outfit and slipped on some high heels. Taking a pill from my purse, I swallowed it with a sip of water to get ready. I made sure my makeup looked just right. I walked into the performance area and took off my robe. Jeremy, who looked out for me, came over and smiled at me. I reached down to unzip him, and we shared an intimate moment together. As we connected, I felt a warmth spreading through me from the pill. Afterward, I stepped back and tidied up a bit before heading to the mattress, where I joked, "Okay, let the customers in." In no time, I found myself busy with customers. A few minutes later, I took a short break to drink some water, feeling a bit hot and sticky. Several people were playfully interacting with me, enjoying the moment. I called it free snacks, and it seemed to be popular with them. All right, back to business. Who's next? I lay back down and continued. I noticed one of the guys knew what he was doing, and I felt excitement building inside me. I sensed that something was happening for both of us, and just as everything peaked, I felt a big rush of emotions. After the excitement faded, I had a strange feeling, as if something wasn't quite right. I looked around, checking to see if anyone else felt the same, but no one else seemed to be worried. James. I woke up around 10:30 that morning. Sonia was in the shower, so I went to the bathroom and got ready. The shower door was foggy, but I could see her outline. I dressed in some comfortable clothes and finished my coffee. A few minutes later, Sonia came downstairs wearing a t-shirt and jeans, her long blonde hair tied back. "Want a cup of coffee?" I asked. "No, I have a hair and nail appointment," she replied. "I'll call you later." With that, she left the room. I shook my head and thought, this won't last long. I washed my cup and put it in the dishwasher. After that, I went upstairs to take a shower. I got clean clothes to wear and picked up my messy clothes from last night, knowing she wouldn't help with that. I started a load of laundry, and just as I was about to call Pete, something stopped me. I remembered that I hadn't checked the camera recordings in a few days, ever since I installed them. I went to my computer and opened the cloud storage. The videos uploaded automatically, and I didn't expect anything surprising, but I was curious about the audio. Whatever I found, I could share with Pete. The recordings from Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday were empty, but Saturday morning showed something interesting. I watched as she came home, looking stunning. I still appreciated her appearance. She had a captivating figure. She entered the house, took off her blouse, and headed to the bathroom with her large designer purse. The camera in the bedroom captured her every move, including her stepping into the shower. Then, I noticed her from the side as she reached into the linen closet. Huh, I said to myself. She pulled out some rolls of toilet paper, large towels, and cleaning supplies. Then she revealed a storage box from the bottom of the cabinet. I watched as she opened it, took out a stack of cash, counted it quickly, and set it aside. She then pulled out a notebook, jotted down some notes, and put everything back as it was. After that, she took a shower, dried off, and went to bed, pulling up the covers. What in the world? I thought. I quickly ran upstairs to the bathroom and crouched down to check the linen closet. I moved the towels and cleaning supplies aside and examined the bottom of the closet. I pushed on the floor and eventually found a hidden panel. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside was a plastic box, gray in color. I took it out and saw it contained 3 notebooks and a file. I dragged them out, already suspecting what they might hold, but intrigued by the notebooks. I opened the oldest one, dated on the cover, and began to read. The information inside drastically changed my understanding of everything. It started when we first met. Her parents worked hard to support her through college. She felt entitled. Her words, not mine. She partied her way through a business degree. Her words again. Then she met me and thought I was her way to a better life. She won me over and led me along her path. We graduated, I got my first job as a lawyer, and we got married. A shocking moment came just 2 weeks before graduation. She went home to visit her family because she said her dad was not well. During that visit, she had a medical procedure that would prevent her from having children. She stayed with friends for 3 weeks to heal. When she returned, she mentioned that she just had her period and wrote, "I won't have to worry about kids." The first 5 years of our marriage were complicated. She was involved with other people and faced health issues. Eventually, she started using protection with others, saying she wanted to focus on her career before having children. Over time, her interest in our relationship faded. I was busy working, and although I was devoted to her, I didn't see what was happening. She found a job as a currency trader while I started my own business. For a while, life seemed good. But then she started a relationship with Marcus Blaine and got involved in many activities outside of our marriage. She created a company, Sonia Inc., and began filing separate tax returns, doing quite well with various investments. Much of this came from her side activities, which she labeled as personal events. I discovered plans involving Sonia and Marcus for February the following year. I found a report binder with passports and an itinerary starting on Valentine's Day for a flight to Mexico City. The bookings were in their names. From Mexico, they planned to travel using new passports to Buenos Aires, then to Johannesburg, South Africa, and on to Madagascar. Later, she would travel alone to Malta, and then to France and Switzerland. It was startling to think of her living a secret life. Inside the binder, I found small spreadsheets showing multiple accounts with overseas deposits totaling about $25 million. They had set up accounts that could transfer money through various routes, leading to Switzerland. The last page included details about something called SEAL Team, a program intended to move all the funds around the world to their destination. Then all the records in the secret program would disappear, leaving only the hidden accounts from the start with a balance of 0. The strange part was that all the documents labeled Sonia's copy, except for the one marked sole copy, were there. Unless I was mistaken, she was going to leave her friend in Madagascar without any money. I could almost hear her saying, "I have an appointment. I'll be back in about an hour and a half." He deserved it, but from what I had learned, that wouldn't happen. I was already planning my next steps. I took pictures of everything in the ledger, the travel plans, and the documents. I even noted the codes for the accounts. After putting everything back in their spot, I noticed a small notebook. I opened it and saw the last entry. $8,500 to NC Beamer. It referred to North Coast Beamer and said, "He makes me pay for my own car repairs. I'll show him." Something inside me sank. I took $10,000 from her box and returned the rest back in the box, which I then placed back in the linen closet. There was a small chance she would notice since there was still over $175,000 in there. I tidied up everything and headed downstairs to call Pete. "I have a job for you, but it's personal." "No problem, boss. Where do you want to meet?" Denny's. In 30 minutes. Okay, see you then. I hung up, grabbed a t-shirt, and headed out to my Bronco to drive to Denny's. I found a booth in the back and waited for about 5 minutes. Pete walked in, spotted me, and came over. Okay, boss, you sounded upset. What's up? This stays between us, no one else. Got it? Sure, he replied as the waitress brought coffee and a menu. Sonia is being unfaithful. Every Tuesday and Thursday at the Radisson, she meets a guy from her work named Marcus Blaine. I need pictures or video, anything you can get. Wow, boss. I didn't expect that. Are you sure? Yes, unfortunately. Okay, I can start on Tuesday. I'll follow her from the time she leaves home until she returns. We had a quiet lunch, and afterward, I went grocery shopping. While walking around, I spotted some old-style diaper pins and bought 2 packs. After checking out, I looked for a thrift shop. After 4 stops, I finally found what I wanted. A field jacket, military style, that came to my hips. It looked hardly used and had a removable lining. I paid in cash and drove off searching for a Halloween store that had opened at the start of October. I found one about 15 miles outside of town, in a small strip mall. Inside, I bought a good quality fake beard and mustache, as well as some scar makeup for my forehead and cheek, and a cap with a blonde wig. I paid for everything with cash from Sonia's box. I drove home and brought my things inside, putting them in my small closet. Sonia called around 5:30 and said she was on her way home. She wanted to go out for Italian dinner and I could pick the place. I got ready quickly, showering, shaving, and dressing nicely. Sonia came in, changed into something beautiful, and went to her bath. When she came back down, looking elegant, she gestured for me to join her and said, "Let's go." We went to Romano's, got a table, and ordered drinks. The dinner was calm, with Sonia glancing around and chatting playfully. After a while, a man approached and asked if he could take her dancing. "He doesn't own me," she replied, smiling, and took his hand. The guy shot me a look, and I felt my annoyance grow as they moved to the dance floor. They danced fast for a while and then switched to slow songs. When they finished, she returned to the table, looking quite close to him. He gave her a quick kiss and gave me a smug look. Upset, I asked her to dance, but she said she didn't want to. I frowned and sat back down. Just as I did, another man approached her. "I'd love to," she said, getting up to join him. He looked at me before leading her away. After some time, she came back, finished her drink, and excused herself. When she returned, she put something wet into my pocket. The rest of the evening felt like a repeat of that moment. Around midnight, I stood up and gently took her hand to help her up. "It's time to go," I said. She didn't want to leave. "We are going home," I insisted. A man approached and asked if I was bothering her. I hadn't been drinking for a while, so I stood my ground. I turned to him and firmly told him to back off. Soon, 2 waiters and the manager came over. "This person is bothering my wife," I stated. "I don't think we'll be back here. I'm really sorry, Mr. Tremaine." "This won't happen again," the manager replied, asking the waiters to remove the man. They helped him out of the restaurant. The manager apologized again. He guided us to the exit, where the valet had our car ready. The door opened, and we stepped outside. At the same time, the Ice Queen slid into the sports car, showing off her long legs and changing the vibe in the parking lot. He shut the door and rushed to the driver's side just as I got there. "It still runs great, Mr. Tremaine." "Thanks, Frederick," I said, handing him a 20. I got in, closed the door, and reached to turn on the heater. She hit my hand away. "You ruined everything for me," she snapped. "I can never go back there." "What makes you think you'll want to go back?" I replied. She glared at me as we drove out of the parking lot. "I can go anywhere I want, anytime. You can't stop me. You're too weak." Just like that, things went from bad to unbearable. The ride home was cold and tense. When we reached the garage, she reached over and took something from my pocket. "You won't need this," she said, giving me a sharp look. Then she walked into the house. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I got out of the car, closed the garage door, and entered the house. Her dress was sprawled on the living room floor. Oh no, I thought. I made my way upstairs to our bedroom and found her there, clearly in a different world. She was making strange sounds, seeming lost in her own thoughts. Feeling overwhelmed, I turned and went to the guest room. I locked the door, took off my clothes, and stepped into the shower, turning the water as hot as I could take it. I could hear her laughing in another room. After I finished, I dried off and crawled into bed, feeling my marriage slipping away as I fell into a restless sleep, accompanied by distant sounds from the other room. The next morning, I woke up and left by 7 a.m. driving my Bronco to church. I knelt in the back and prayed throughout Mass, hoping for guidance to get through this tough time. After church, I went to Waffle House for a big breakfast. My usual waitress, Ginger, was kind and let me enjoy 4 cups of coffee. I finally left, tipping her well because my mom used to be a waitress and I knew it was hard work. Plus, she always took good care of me. Driving home, I didn't know what I would find, and I got back around 11:30. She was gone. I decided it was time to put my plan into action. I grabbed the jacket I had bought, some safety pins, and a few heavy towels to prepare for what came next. I went to the guest room because I wasn't sure when she would come home. After folding and pinning the towels, I carefully arranged them inside the coat. I tried it on and looked in the mirror. I seemed much heavier. Perfect. I got the scar stickers and, with some glue, added a fresh-looking scar on my left cheek and a well-healed one on my forehead. I put on the mustache and beard and added the hat and wig. The person in the mirror looked about 45 years old, overweight, and nothing like myself. Pete would start observing on Tuesday, and by Friday morning, I would have what I needed. On Monday evening, I planned to visit the Old Oak Bar to talk to Mr. Fleming about getting something for protection. After that, I changed out of my disguise and neatly stored it away. Sunday evening felt very cold at my house, but Sonia was cheerful all night. She walked around, trying to get a reaction from me. She hummed and made little comments about how Sunday will never be the same. Finally, I stood in front of her and expressed my frustration. "We haven't been close in about 4 months, and I don't get why. I can't handle it anymore." It was now late October. She gave me a challenging look and said, "Hang in there until Valentine's Day, and I'll make it worth it." "What does that mean? Wouldn't you like to know?" She smiled. At that moment, things grew tense, and I could feel myself getting anxious. On Monday, I woke up early and headed to work, stopping at the Waffle House for breakfast. It wasn't the healthiest choice, but it tasted good. Ginger was there, and she quickly sensed that something was off. "Rough night?" she asked. I thought, just a tough weekend and years of challenges. "Nah, just a bad weekend," I replied. "The usual?" "Yeah, and can you please keep the coffee coming?" Gradually, I started to feel a bit better and my frustration began to fade. After finishing my breakfast and 2 cups of coffee, I went to pay the bill. "Feeling better, huh?" Ginger, who was about 4,550 years old, was friendly and very much married to a detective for over 25 years. She was about to become a grandmother soon since her daughter was married to an Air Force pilot. Ginger had a soft spot for animals and people in need. "You need a change, Jimmy." Only my grandmother and Ginger called me Jimmy. I had told her my name was James or Jim, but she insisted I looked like a Jimmy. "I think I will be changing, Ginger. Things are not as they seem." I got to work and was busy with my tasks by 11 a.m. when my phone rang. "Boss, it's your wife," said Janine. I answered the call and talked to my wife. "Yes, Sonia. What do you need?" "I need you to join me on Friday night," she replied. "The Cancer Society is hosting a ball, and the governor will be there. We need to make an appearance, so be ready to look your best. Got it?" "Sure, whatever makes you happy, dear. Will anyone else be joining us?" I thought about getting some new headphones after she shouted into the phone and hung up. At least she won't be busy with anything else on Friday night. Maybe this could work out well with Pete keeping an eye on her. 2 weeks of hotel meetings with her friend would be much easier without anyone watching next Friday. I smiled, my mind racing with plans. Monday night came, and my wife went to bed early after finishing most of a bottle of wine. She was fast asleep by 8:30, helped along by a couple of sleeping pills. I waited until 10 o'clock, then got into my disguise. I quietly moved through the kitchen and into the garage. I backed the Bronco out, knowing any vehicle I drove would be noticeable. I would have to figure that out. I drove to the Old Oak Bar and parked around the corner. Walking in, I tried to blend in, taking a seat away from the only 2 other men at the bar. The place was dimly lit, creating a nice atmosphere. There were about 15 customers, most seated at tables. It was calm inside, and it didn't seem to get busier after I arrived. The basketball game was on TV. I ordered a beer and took a sip. Just as I was getting into it, the bartender approached me. One man down the bar shifted seats, but the other one beside me didn't seem to notice. "You don't look familiar. Are you a cop?" he asked. "No," I replied. "I'm looking for someone a friend recommended." "Who are you looking for?" "Myron Fleming. I need to talk business with him. I'm not here to cause any problems, just to find Myron." The bartender leaned closer and placed a small tape recorder on the bar, along with the barrel of a shotgun. "Are you a law officer?" he asked. "I'm not, and I've never been a law officer in my life." I maintained eye contact, and I noticed the man on my right was suddenly paying attention. "I was in the Marines 19 years ago," I added, still holding his gaze. The bartender held mine for a moment before the man on my right moved and sat next to me. The shotgun and tape recorder were put away. "So you have a friend?" Oh, I turned to him. He was a black man, likely in his late 20s or early 30s, looking fit and well-groomed. "Are you Myron?" I asked. "Maybe," he responded. "You come highly recommended. People say you are good, discreet, and dependable." "Maybe," he replied. "What are you looking for?" "I need a Glock, 9mm, a spare magazine, and some ammo. 50 rounds should be enough." "Why do you need it?" "Does it matter?" "Not really, but I like to take care of my customers. I hope they come back." "That's what my friend said. If this goes well, I probably won't see you again." "What else did your friend share?" I smiled and said, "You told him to wear a disguise." "In that case," he said, "listen to the advice. For $2,000, you get what you want. For $3,000, you get one that can't be traced. For $4,250, you get a brand new one. I just want one that works well. I don't care about where it came from. If you have one you want to sell that works, I'll take it." He paused for a moment and said, "Tomorrow night at 8:30. Don't be late or early." Then he stood up to leave. "One more thing," I said. He looked at me curiously. "What?" he replied. "You aren't a police officer, are you?" He raised an eyebrow, then smiled. "Nice one. Don't be late." He returned to his seat and I finished my drink, stood up and slipped a $50 bill to the bartender. "Thanks," I said before heading out. I walked around the block, away from the Bronco, then approached it, satisfied my evening was clear. I got in and spent a moment adjusting before starting the truck and driving home. Once I parked in the garage, I shut the door, took off my disguise, and hid it in the truck. Thankfully, she disliked being in the Bronco. The next day was Tuesday. I was up early before 7 o'clock. Waffle House was open and a bit busy. I found a seat and waited until Ginger had a moment to serve me. She smiled as she put coffee in front of me. "Breakfast is on the way." "You know me well?" I replied. I enjoyed waffles, hash browns, an English muffin, and sausage, a true breakfast treat. After finishing, I signaled for more coffee. She refilled my cup and took a brief break. "Feeling better today?" she asked. "No, just not any worse." "If you want to talk, my husband is free today. He had to get the oil changed on the expedition. He's a good listener and thinks highly of you. He says for a lawyer, you're pretty decent." I chuckled, surprised to hear that. But I really didn't want to discuss my thoughts with a police officer. I thanked her, paid the bill with a nice tip, and headed off to work. I stopped by Dunkin' for 24 donuts and opened the office about 45 minutes early. Janine arrived next, followed closely by Pete. "Ooh, you're going to ruin my diet. Thanks a lot," she joked. Pete took a chocolate-filled donut and asked if I thought he was a police officer. "That special favor is in effect," he said. "Thanks," I replied. I held Janine in high regard, like a sister. Janine LaPierre was a smart, kind, and sweet woman. She was married to Sergeant Joseph LaPierre, who worked for the Texas Highway Patrol. Janine had a degree in business administration and was just a few credits away from completing her master's. She also studied some criminal law. At 42, she had 4 children, 3 boys and an energetic little girl. One of my clients once said she resembled a famous actress. 3 weeks after our company Christmas party, Janine came to my office, closed the door, and sat down. She looked down at her hands and seemed a bit shy. She had a lovely smile. "I'm going to share something with you," she said. "If you want to end our working relationship after this, I understand. But I promised myself I would always be honest with you and give my best. I don't trust your wife. If I were you, I would be careful and keep a close watch." I was surprised and didn't know how to respond. "Thank you for being honest," I replied, trying to keep a small smile. "Jo agrees with me. She was flirting with him before she even knew who he was. She also showed interest in Tony and Gerald. I will stay alert," I said, thinking about her husband, who was big and strong, but also very friendly. "Pete mentioned something similar," she added. "Thank you, Janine. I really appreciate your help." That evening, I got ready for my appointment. Sonia had not come home and just sent me a message saying, "I have some work to do. Get me a couple of bottles of wine." I parked my car a short distance from the Old Oak Bar, checked the time, got out, and crossed the street. I walked through the front door just at 8:29, walked to the bar, and sat down right at 8:30. "You're right on time," Mr. Fleming said, sitting next to me. He placed a bag on the bar, and I handed him an envelope with $3,500 in it. He opened it, counted the money, and remarked, "There's a little extra here." "I believe in rewarding good service and keeping things private," I replied, having taken a bit from Sonia's funds, so it wasn't a problem for me. "Thank you for your business. Here's some advice: stay low-key and know your limits." "Thanks, Mr. Fleming. I'd prefer not to meet again." "Same here." I left the bar and took a longer route back to my car, making sure to be cautious the entire way. After checking my surroundings, I drove to a nearby liquor store and bought 2 boxes of wine for Sonia. When I got home, I carefully put everything away. I left the wine on the kitchen counter and then went upstairs to take a shower. I settled down in the guest room for the night. At 11:15, Sonia finally came in. For about 5 minutes, everything was quiet. Then I heard, "You jerk." I smiled and turned over to sleep. The rest of the week went by quickly. On Wednesday morning, things felt tense at home because of the wine. Sonia left for work and came back around 5 p.m. She didn't say anything, but she kept giving me angry looks. It felt chilly at bedtime. On Thursday morning, she told me about a meeting to prepare for a fundraiser on Friday night. "Remember, we are going out." "Don't embarrass me," she said. "I'll probably be busy most of the night, but I'm sure you can find something to do." "Sure," I muttered. "I bet your friend will be there, too." I finished getting ready and left for breakfast at Waffle House about 20 minutes after she did. Ginger saw me come in and had my coffee ready as I sat down. "Same as always?" she asked. "Sounds good to me," I replied. I had been coming here regularly for breakfast but had been eating my other meals at different places. I needed to change that. Soon, I told myself. Very soon. When I got to work, I tried to keep my mind busy. Janine watched me closely for most of the morning. At 11:45, she came into my office with her purse and said, "Come on, let's go to lunch." I looked at her, thought for a moment, and replied, "Sure, why not?" We left the office and walked to my car. She glanced at me while I opened the door. "I was hoping you'd bring the other car. Oh well, maybe next time." She got in, and soon we were on our way to Texas Roadhouse. We got a table, and before long, we were sipping sweet tea and waiting for ribs and steak. Janine looked at me and asked, "Okay, what's bothering you?" I sighed and replied, trying to stay serious, "Janine, I really like you. I want us to have something, and I hope you'll consider it. We can keep it private and enjoy ourselves." "What do you think?" She burst out laughing. "You know one thing about me? I can't tell a lie. Whenever I try, I just start laughing. I can joke about surprise parties, but otherwise, I'm terrible at it. A running joke with Joe is that each day when he comes home, he kisses me and asks, 'Did you see anyone today?' 21 years of that, boss." Just then, the waitress brought our lunch. "So what's really going on?" I sighed and explained my situation with Sonia. "We have this event tomorrow, and her friend will be there." "I thought it might be something like that. How long has this been going on?" I lied a bit, not wanting to reveal everything. "About 7 months. Thank goodness I could stretch the truth. What are you planning to do?" "I'm going to end things with her. I'm probably going to have to give up my shirt, but I think I can save the company." I'm sorry, boss. Joe and I are here for you if you need anything. I might end up in a hotel or staying with Alan for a bit. You don't deserve this. I'm sorry it took so long for you to find out. You will get through this, I promise. We'll take care of you. Just don't do anything reckless. Can I tell Joe? Sure, I replied with a sigh. Don't worry, I won't do anything foolish. I'm likely going to serve her papers next Monday at her work. That gives Pete a couple more days to get recordings of them together. Sorry for the language. Well, I didn't think they were just playing board games, she said. Thanks, Janine. Just think of this as a surprise party, okay? Got it, boss. Thank goodness I'm better at this than she is. Thursday moved into Friday, and soon it was Friday evening. When I got home, she was already there. She was in the bathtub, enjoying a soak with a glass of wine, scented candles, and soft music. In a normal marriage, I would have felt much differently. My wife is beautiful, but instead, all I could picture was her with someone else. Not exactly how I wanted to feel. I went to the guest bathroom, took a shower, dried off, shaved, and put on my tuxedo. I headed downstairs and grabbed a soda while I caught some of the ball game. She came down about 45 minutes later, wearing a long black dress that had a slit up the front. When she walked, I could see her stockings and heels. The top of her dress revealed a lot. Not exactly the style I would want for us. We headed out and got into the car. Why didn't you get it washed? She asked. Why bother? It's just us, I replied. She shot me a glare. We drove to the convention center where the valet parked the car. As she got out, she walked confidently into the lobby, and all eyes turned to her. I followed a step behind, needing to grab the valet ticket. She didn't look back, engaging everyone around her. She made her way into the event. She was definitely the star of the night. Almost immediately, Marcus Blaine approached her. He left his wife's side to talk with my wife. I moved closer and said, "Excuse me." He looked at me with a smirk. "Oh, didn't you know? You're not part of the committee, so you have to stay back," he said, as he guided her towards the photographers. She glanced back at me and gave a slight smile. "I will be busy all night. Try to keep yourself entertained. And please don't make me look bad." I felt my anger rise as I noticed many curious looks directed at me. I turned and headed to the bar. I got a beer and looked over to see my wife, clearly enjoying the attention she was receiving. I took a long sip of my drink, trying to calm down, when a friendly voice interrupted me. "Could you buy a girl a drink?" she asked, looking up at me. "It's an open bar," I replied, trying to shake off my irritation. "I thought I was the only one feeling a bit out of sorts tonight," she said with a smile. "I'm Barbara Blaine. I remember you from the last company picnic. You have 3 lovely kids." "Thanks. I don't get intimate with others, but I do enjoy flirting. Let's give everyone something to talk about tonight. Show them a big smile." After a moment of thought, I said, "Sure, why not?" I took her arm and led her to a table a bit away from the main crowd. I went back for some champagne and 2 glasses and another beer. When I returned, I sat down next to her, leaned close, and whispered, "Are they watching us?" "One is, but the other seems distracted." "Don't worry," I said, trying to keep the mood light. "I just want to make sure we have their attention." She looked at me, surprised. "Are you former military?" "Yes, I was in the Marines," I replied. "Just 1 tour." "Okay, but don't overdo it," she said softly. "I just want to keep it interesting." "So what are your plans?" she asked as I poured the champagne. "I'm planning to file for divorce next week. I just need a bit more information. Want to join me in this?" Her smile reminded me of the affection I hadn't felt in a long time. "Absolutely," she exclaimed. "You're a lawyer, right?" "Yes, I have my own practice on the northeast side of town. I'll take care of everything." "I've been waiting for this for ages," she said. The band started playing, and I asked her if she wanted to dance. "I haven't danced in a while," she said as she got up. She looked good, and while she wasn't a model, she was appealing enough to take my mind off my troubles. We spent the entire night together. At 1 a.m., I approached my wife and asked, "Do you want to go home?" "No, I'm having too much fun," she replied with someone's arm around her. "Well, I'm taking Barbara home. See if you can catch a ride," I responded, hoping to provoke a reaction. "Marcus," my wife said, looking concerned. "Looks like you're busy, Marcus," Barbara added. "I'm sure Jim can help me," she said as she lightly touched my arm and smiled. "Fine, we'll go," Sonia replied with frustration. I leaned in to kiss Barbara on the cheek to thank her for a nice evening, but she turned and kissed me on the lips instead. Marcus seemed upset, and Sonia pulled me towards the door, clearly angry. "You just couldn't help yourself, could you?" "Everyone saw that," she said. As we left, a car pulled up and the driver stepped out. I quickly paid him and got in. He hurried around to open the passenger side for Sonia as she walked over in her high heels. "What are you looking at?" she shouted, visibly upset. She got in and slammed the door. "Where are your things?" I asked curiously. "You want to know?" she replied with a smirk. I kept my eyes on the road as we drove away. This was the moment of truth. I felt numb as I drove. Sonia seemed lost in her own world. My thoughts turned to our future, and it was clear my marriage was in serious trouble. By the time we got home, she was asleep. I opened the garage door and parked the car, feeling a mix of emotions. I needed to end this, and it was time to face the reality. I thought about selling the car, knowing things had changed. She was asleep in the front seat, and I decided to leave her there for now. I closed the garage door and went to the guest bedroom to reflect. In the morning, I headed to Waffle House for breakfast. When I arrived, I found Sonia had somehow made it upstairs and was resting on the bed fully dressed. Ginger, the waitress, greeted me with a warm smile and coffee. "We need to talk," she said, surprising me. Throughout our conversation, I learned that Ginger and her husband owned the Waffle House, and he worked the overnight shift. "You'll meet him if you stay around," she added. "He usually picks me up on most days, and we go home where we spend time together. Often we end up falling asleep, so our kids like to call before they come over, just to be sure. They have a funny way of looking at their parents growing old together. He has 3 kids, a married daughter, and 2 boys, one at West Point and the other at the Naval Academy. And then there's you," she mentioned. I learned a lot about her family, but I shared my own story, too. I talked about the betrayal and the choice we made before marriage. I didn't mention some things, though, like my Friday nights or the money details. I told her I would file for divorce a week from Monday and serve her at her job. I felt lost and sad. She listened and kept my coffee cup full, having the other waitresses help her with the customers. She was quiet as she thought about what I said, shaking her head occasionally. "You are the kindest and most trusting person I know. You might also be the most easily fooled," she said. "Terry, come here." A tall guy in a jacket and tie came over and sat beside me. "Counselor," he introduced himself. "You must be the strength in this group. I feel like I'm talking to the heart and the mind," Ginger joked. "I hope so," he replied, leaning over to give her a friendly kiss. Ginger quickly updated him on my situation. He listened quietly and then asked, "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to divorce her a week from Monday, right after my investigator gathers this week's evidence." He looked at me seriously. "Please, don't do anything rash. I don't want to meet you in a professional way." "I won't. I just want her out." I was relieved to keep my calm expression. After paying my bill, I headed home. It was about 11 a.m. when I parked in the garage and went inside. I started the coffee pot and heated up some frozen treats for breakfast. Once the coffee was ready, I poured a cup, took my breakfast, and sat at the counter. At around 11:45, she came downstairs looking a bit disheveled. "Well," I said, "look who finally decided to join the world." She frowned and moved to the coffee maker. "It's good you're taking care of yourself," I added, teasing. She shot me a look and replied sharply, "Are you going to freshen up, or is that your new scent?" Her eyes widened, and in a moment of anger she tossed her cup at me, but missed, thankfully. She approached me with her hands outstretched. I held her wrists gently and pushed her back. "Happy Valentine's Day," she yelled before suddenly laughing. "It won't be long now." I decided to step outside for some fresh air. "I need to mow the lawn," I said. About an hour later, she sped out of the garage in her car and left. The rest of the day, I kept busy and tinkered with my truck. I drove my car to get it cleaned. I kept the roof down to freshen it up a bit. When I got home, my partner still wasn't there. I watched some TV, then around 6:30, I went to Saltgrass Steakhouse for a nice meal and a drink. I returned home around 9 p.m., but my partner was still missing. I took a shower, got ready for bed, and turned in for the night. I woke up at 7 a.m., took care of my morning routine, and headed downstairs. As I passed our bedroom, I noticed my partner sleeping on the bed. Her clothes were scattered down to the front door, which was open. I could see her car parked awkwardly on the lawn. I locked the door and went to the garage to take my truck. The engine roared to life, and I backed it out. I parked her car in the garage, switched it off, and took her garage door opener with me. Needing some clarity, I drove to church. I knelt in a pew and bowed my head to pray. Deep down, I knew I was facing a tough choice that could weigh on me greatly. I felt torn. Why is this happening? What have I done? I cared for her so much, and now I feel so angry. No answer came. During my time in the Marines, there were moments when I prayed too. I hadn't been very religious before that, but I recalled what my dad used to say. There are no non-believers in tough times. It brought me a little comfort. Was I still scared? Absolutely. Anyone in danger knows that fear is real. This time I asked for help, but there was no sign, no comforting voice. I felt so alone. Maybe I was expected to deal with this myself. My grandma always said that challenges were given based on our strength. I just wish the challenges weren't so heavy. I felt empty and frustrated. After the service, I sought forgiveness for what I might do later. I then headed to the Waffle House. As I sat at the counter, Shannon came over. "Ginger isn't here today, so I'm taking care of you," she said with a smile. Shannon was cheerful and friendly, though not quite my type. Still, I appreciated her warm presence. I had breakfast, paid, and told the staff I'd see them tomorrow. On my way home, I felt lost. I parked in the garage and stepped inside the house. A very angry woman came up to me. "Where is the remote? I couldn't get out of the garage, and I was stuck here." "I'm sorry. I thought you were not feeling well. Your car was parked sideways on the lawn. Your clothes were all over the place." "It's our bedroom," she yelled. "You could have fooled me," I replied. "Where did you go yesterday?" "None of your business," she screamed. "You don't control me. Where I go and what I do is my business," she shouted. "Why are we even married, Sonia?" I asked. "Because I said so." She seemed out of touch with reality. "Don't worry, Valentine's Day is coming. Cuck!" Hearing her say that really hurt. I felt something cold and painful inside of me. At that moment, she felt more like a stranger than my wife. I reached into my jacket and pulled out her remote, throwing it gently to her. It slipped from her hands and fell to the floor. I didn't ask where she was going as she stormed past me and headed to the garage. 5 minutes later, she was gone. Where did she go? I had no idea. I went to the living room and turned on the Texans football game. They lost badly, too. On Monday morning, I woke up and tidied up a bit. I went downstairs, but it looked like she never came home. I left for my usual breakfast. Ginger was waiting for me with coffee. "Shannon was sad she didn't get to talk to you," she said as she took my order. I smiled. "No matter what, I can't cheat. I could never do what she has done to me. I think Shannon could do a great job of cheering me up, but I couldn't cross that line." Ginger smiled back at me. I told her that. She gets it, even if she's disappointed. I smiled a little. "Thanks, Ginger. Sometimes good things happen to good people. Just keep being good." I finished my breakfast and paid my bill as Terry walked in. "How's it going, counselor?" he asked. "Good so far, Sergeant." I walked out to my car and drove to Shipley's nearby, ordering 2 dozen cream-filled donuts and half a dozen jelly ones. Then it was off to work. I arrived at 8:30, parked my big car, and went into my office. Most of my coworkers were already there. "What, are you all trying to get overtime? Where's Pete?" I asked. Janine replied, "Ooh, cream-filled. I thought you loved me. Pete is running a little late." She gave me a pointed look as she took a bite of her donut. "He said you would understand." 15 minutes later, Pete walked in looking tired. "Long night?" I asked. "Long weekend," he replied. "I followed her on Friday night when she went with you to the gala. I managed to keep an eye on her all night." "Wow, you're good." "I didn't even notice you," I said. "That's why you pay me the big bucks." "Well, not big enough yet, but we'll see." "So, what did you find out?" I asked. Enough. She met her friend 3 times, and there was another guy, not sure who, twice. He was the one who took her things. There was video and audio. Can you identify him? I asked. Give me a couple of days. I can use my facial recognition program and a list of the people there. Here's what I want, I said. I need 4 sets of information. 1 for me, 1 for the lawsuit, 1 for Mrs. Blaine, and 1 for her workplace. I need them by Friday morning. Stop all the surveillance on Thursday night. That will give me enough time to send everything where it needs to go. Boss, I have more from this weekend. It doesn't include her friend, but it does show other questionable activities. That's what made it a long weekend. Do you think her husband would want to see it? I asked, only out of curiosity. I don't like asking this, but find a website that has amateur videos. Download this weekend's footage along with her personal information, name, phone number, age, and workplace. Anything that won't connect back to me. Can you do that? No problem, boss. I'll get right on it. I started on the divorce paperwork. By 11 o'clock, I had everything ready with references to videos and audio. I had documents for emotional distress and her work details. By noon, everything was done, and I was ready for lunch. I went to Saltgrass, my favorite steakhouse, and had a meal. I called the Jaguar dealership to schedule an oil change and routine checkup for the car. After leaving, I drove home, where the service technician picked up the car and took it to the dealership. I would get it back the next afternoon. I took the following day off and went 3 houses down to my friends, an elderly couple, the Swensons. They owned a 1984 Buick Skylark. Over the years, I had done many small tasks for them, like mowing their lawn, picking up their mail when they traveled, and taking care of their dog. They were wonderful people and treated me like family. Sonia was not their favorite. I asked Mr. Swenson if I could borrow his car for about an hour to go to the store for parts for my truck. I explained that the Jaguar was in the shop for the day, and I needed to fix the truck. Sure, Jim, take your time. We're watching an NCIS marathon, he said. Thank you, I really appreciate it. I'll fill the tank, I responded. No need, unless you're driving far, he laughed. I smiled and said it was just to the auto parts store. He handed me the keys and waved me off. I drove to AutoZone, bought a starter solenoid, 3 fan belts, a case of oil, and 3 oil filters. Then, I went to Walmart and made 2 extra ignition keys for the Buick. I filled up the tank, drove back home, unloaded my items, and returned the car to Mr. Swenson. The Swensons usually went to bed right after the 10 p.m. news, so on Friday night at midnight I planned to borrow their car. And the '84 Buick is about as plain as any car can be. I got home and set up the workbench to work on the truck. Sonia came in, took an iced tea from the fridge, freshened up, and left around 7 p.m., no farewell or anything. Soon enough, things would change. On Wednesday, I woke up at 6:30 and headed out for breakfast. I decided to try Waffle House. A little change is nice. Ginger waved when I walked in and set a coffee in front of me. How's Terry? I asked. He's fine. We're going away for the rest of the week to relax. How are you? She replied. I'm doing all right. Things will start to wrap up next Monday when she and her boyfriend are served. After that, it's just a waiting game. That's good, she said. We're all here for you. Even if you end up struggling and have to eat here all the time, we'll still support you. She smiled. I laughed and said, thanks for the encouragement. Her smile grew. I finished breakfast, hugged Ginger, paid, and left. I picked up some donuts and got to work around 8:45. Janine greeted me with a hug. Joe says to stay positive, boss. It will end soon, she said. We worked over coffee, and the day passed quickly. I got home Wednesday evening, and she was already there. She had made dinner for herself and curled up on the couch to watch TV. What's wrong? I asked. You look a bit off. She smirked and replied, I'm just uncomfortable. She kept pushing through it. I got up, went to the garage, opened the door, and rolled in the Jag. It looked almost brand new. They had worked on the engine, changed the oil, and cleaned the brakes. I put the top down and covered it up. Then I checked the Bronco, slid under it, and drained the oil. After that, I disconnected the battery and set it on a board on the workbench. I took off the starter solenoid and pulled it from the firewall, then removed the fan belt, power steering belt, and alternator belt. After washing my hands, I went back inside. She saw me and asked, "How long will this last?" "As long as it needs to," I replied. "It's been about 12 months since we were intimate, and 12 months since we were together in a different way. What do you have to offer?" "Valentine's Day," was all she said. "What's the deal with Valentine's Day?" I asked, pretending not to understand. "You'll see. It's going to be a big surprise," she responded. Then, as I walked upstairs, I heard her say, "Good night." Thursday morning came, and I left early for breakfast. Guess where? Yep, Waffle House. I walked in and sat down. "Coffee?" asked Ginger. "I guess," I replied. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just passing the time." "Well, keep your spirits up, eat your breakfast, and head to work." "Thanks, Mom." That was a little mean. She smiled and went to help another customer. I finished my meal, had a second cup of coffee, and paid the bill. "See you tomorrow, Ginger." She waved as I got into my car and drove to work. I skipped the donuts today since it was a special day for others. Pete arrived around 9 o'clock and came in to give me an update. "Last day, boss. We'll finish our surveillance tonight and have a report for you tomorrow morning around 11 o'clock. "Thanks, Pete. I'm looking forward to moving on." Janine buzzed me. "Boss, Mr. Jalez would like to speak with you." "Send him in." Pete stood up. "Back to work," he joked, and left. Tom Jalez entered as Janine closed the door. "Mr. Jalez, how can I help you?" "Mr. Tremaine, I wanted to thank you. Doreen and I have made a lot of progress in our marriage. The separation only lasted about a week and a half, and now we're together again. We're still going to counseling, which can be tough, but I love her, and I didn't want to lose her. We owe you for this. After I left here a couple of weeks ago, your investigator stopped me and shared what happened at the hospital, and I appreciated it. His story matched what my wife told me. Mr. Tremaine, we are very grateful. Some people just get lucky, Tom. Go home, cherish your wife, and keep talking." "Thank you again, sir," he said. "If you ever need anything, just call." He stood, shook my hand, and as he walked out, I thought I saw a smile and a small tear in his eye. One for the good guys, I thought. The day went by quickly until about 4 o'clock when I got a call from my soon-to-be ex-wife. "I just wanted to let you know I have a meeting with the library committee. It's starting a bit earlier and will probably go longer. I hope the Radisson can handle the extra time. Tell Marcus he's not being friendly." "What?" she shouted. I hung up. I left for home at 6 o'clock, picked up pizza and a 6-pack of soda. I got home, ate my pizza, enjoyed my drink, and watched the Jets and Giants play to a scoreless tie. Then I went to bed. Friday morning I woke up at 6 and noticed she was in the shower. I walked into the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and flushed the toilet. As I went downstairs, I heard a loud gasp. I chuckled to myself, hopped into my car, and drove to Waffle House. Shannon greeted me with coffee and soon brought out my breakfast. She smiled and mentioned that Ginger was off today, so I was in her care. I thanked her and leisurely enjoyed another cup of coffee, settled my bill, and left for work, stopping to pick up donuts on the way. This might be the last time, I thought. Picking up donuts, that is. If things don't go perfectly, I could be in big trouble. I arrived at work, my mind racing with thoughts. I placed the donuts in the break room and grabbed another cup of coffee. Janine came in with the mail and asked how things were going. "So far, so good," I replied. Pete arrived at 10:30 with the final report. "Please mail one copy to Barbara Blaine and leave the rest here. Do you have all the originals?" "Yep, boss. They are all in files in my office." "Great. I'll prepare these to file and for service on Monday. Day." I thanked him again and returned to my tasks. I packaged everything together and called Mrs. Blaine. "Hello, Barbara. This is Jim Tremaine. Can you talk?" "Good. I just got my final report tapes, pictures, audio, and video. I'll send you a copy by messenger. Do you have your own attorney? No? That's fine. I can set everything up here with my associate. Also, I'll send you a copy of the divorce paperwork. Yes, it will be served at work Monday morning. I'm sorry it has to be under these circumstances." "Uh-huh, that sounds interesting. We'll talk after the divorces are final so we don't make mistakes. That's right. Talk to you soon. Goodbye." Janine got us a couple of Jersey Mike's subs and some sodas for lunch. "Are you going to be okay this weekend?" she asked. Yeah, I think I'll work on the Bronco, fix it up, change the oil, and take it for a drive. Just don't do anything reckless. That's from Joe. I agree, so if you need us, just call, and you can come over for some BBQ. Thanks, I'll remember that. After lunch, we finished the paperwork and sent the messenger to Mrs. Blaine. Then we got the documents to the courthouse and prepared to inform the other parties. I left for home to finalize my plans. When I got home, I grabbed 2 large garbage bags and put one inside the other. I took 3 pairs of latex gloves, put 1 pair on, and got everything ready in the garage on the Bronco's front passenger floor. I loaded a tool and prepared it carefully. I also gathered my jacket, some accessories, a hat, and a wig. I took 1 pair of gloves with me and added a couple of items to the pile. I went upstairs and sat on the couch. At 7 p.m., Sonia came down dressed for a night out. I thought to myself that she might not need those things tonight since it looked like it would be a long evening. She was leaving a bit early. I went into her office and turned on her laptop. I accessed her account, opened the spreadsheet files, and entered the codes to transfer the funds. I waited for a moment. The screen blinked, and in about 12 seconds, it showed that approximately $23 million was no longer in the account. I accessed the SEAL team file, entered the required codes, and after about 45 seconds, the message, "Transfer accomplished," appeared briefly before disappearing. The task was complete. I left the computer open on the Files page and moved on to the master bathroom. There, I checked the bottom shelf, where I found her hidden stash. I carefully took out the journals and set them aside. I also found a ledger, which I reviewed to ensure it only contained the most recent account balance. Any sensitive information, such as codes or references to the SEAL team, was removed and kept separately. Afterward, I replaced the towels and cleaning supplies to make sure everything looked untouched. Gathering the documents, I moved to her office. I examined the paper shredder, took the shredded material, and replaced it with the original scraps. I carefully shredded the papers I brought with me and collected the remains. I then went out to the patio. Lighting up my Weber grill, I placed the shredded papers inside and burned them thoroughly until nothing but ashes remained. To ensure complete disposal, I stirred the ashes, added lighter fluid, and lit another match. The flames flared briefly before dying down. After stirring the ashes again, I covered them with charcoal and left them to smolder. By 8:15 p.m., I checked the time. Satisfied with the progress, I went to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, and settled onto the couch in the living room to unwind. As for Sonia, she headed out earlier in the evening and arrived at a bar around 7:25 p.m. She took a seat, ordered a drink, and spent some time quietly sipping and watching the clock. At 8:30, she got up and approached the doorway where Ralph, the doorman, was standing. She exchanged a friendly word with him before heading to another area. Jeremy was there to greet her and opened the door to the private entertainment space. She went into her dressing room to prepare. A sense of routine accompanied her as she got ready for her usual Friday night performance. At 9 p.m., Sonia stepped onto the stage, ready to begin the evening's entertainment. Jeremy pulled up his underwear and pants, smiled, and walked out the door. James. At 10:30, I went to the garage to get my disguise, which included plastic bags and some items I needed. I put a spare magazine in my left pocket, extra ammo in my right pocket, and the gun in my right pocket, too. I took some makeup, a hat, and a coat to the bathroom. I applied some makeup to create a scar on my forehead and cheek, blending it in. Then I put on the wig and cap and slipped into some old but clean jeans. Next, I put on my old hunting boots, grabbed my deck sneakers, and picked up my padded coat. I headed to the living room, put on my coat, and wore 2 pairs of gloves. I took a tongue depressor and some tape, making sure I had nothing else in my pockets except for $50, then went out the front door. I locked the door and placed my keys under the mat after taking the key for the Buick. At 11 o'clock, I walked down the street, practicing my limp. When I got to the Swensons, I saw that all their lights were off and got into their car. I took some tape, covered the dome light switch with the tongue depressor, and taped it to the door frame. I shut the door and put the key in the ignition. I turned it without starting the car and put it in neutral. The car rolled into the street. I stopped the car, shifted it into park, and started the engine. I reversed for a moment, then shifted into drive, driving slowly down the street. About 200 feet down, I turned on the headlights and headed to the bar. I arrived at the bar around 11:20 and parked behind it. I got out and walked around to the front. There were about 810 cars in the lot, including Sonia's. I entered through the front door, ordered a club soda, and took my time sipping it while I watched the waitress going in and out of the back room. Finally, around 11:55, I stood up and walked over just as a waitress came out. I handed a man a $50 bill and moved into the corridor. There were only a few guys in the main area, so I figured it was the right moment. I approached one of the men and noticed a baseball bat behind his stool. He looked at me and asked, "How much?" I replied, $850. His eyes brightened, and he reached for a ticket. He smiled and said, "Here you go." "Just a moment," I told him, reaching into my pocket and pulling out the gun. "Give me all the money," I said firmly. "Okay, just stay calm," he said, handing me a large bundle of cash. "Inside." I motioned for him to go ahead. "All right," he said, opening the door and walking through. I then made a quick move, taking control of the situation. The atmosphere shifted, and I was met with surprised reactions. Another man was getting close to a woman, while another man was behind her. Two more men were nearby, being entertained by her. I stepped closer and aimed my weapon at the man on her right. He fell back, and I quickly turned to the man on her left. Just as he was distracted, I shot him too. Everyone was so lost in their moment that they didn't see me coming. I raised my gun near the man at the back and took a moment before pulling the trigger. He fell forward, and as I looked around, the other man took a hit in the forehead just as he was startled. The man behind her finally noticed what was happening. He tried to get away, saying, "No, wait," but I didn't hesitate and took care of him too. I reloaded my weapon and turned to leave, just as the bartender and another man walked in. The bartender, who later turned out to be the owner, had a shotgun, while the other man had a baseball bat. I quickly dealt with both of them before turning back to my wife. I wanted to confront her, but instead I leaned in and looked her in the eye. She was shocked, and before she could say anything, I fired. I put the gun away and walked out the back door. I crossed the parking lot and made my way to my car. I sat in the front seat with my feet outside and started taking off my disguise, putting everything into plastic bags. I wiped my face clean and added the rag to the bags. After checking for anything I might have missed, I tightly sealed the bags and closed the door. I started the car and after checking my surroundings, drove onto the street. A couple of blocks later, I spotted what I needed, a garbage truck parked nearby. I drove down the street, passing a garbage truck as it stopped to empty a can. A few blocks later, I turned right, drove a short distance, and made a U-turn to park on the right side of the street. I shut off the engine and lights. Grabbing the bag, I crossed the street to a nearby garbage can close to the corner. I lifted the lid, removed a similar-looking bag, and placed mine underneath it, making the can about 2/3 full. I then put the other bag back on top and hurried back to the car. Sitting in the car, I waited. About 15 minutes later, the garbage truck pulled up, grabbed the can, emptied it into the truck, and gave it an extra shake before setting it back down on the curb. The truck moved on, collecting from a few more cans as I watched. Once it was gone, I got out of the car and crossed the street again to check the can. It was completely empty. Satisfied, I returned to the car, started it up, and headed home. As I neared my street, I slowed down and turned off the headlights, making my way carefully. I pulled into Swenson's driveway, shut off the engine, and got out. Quietly, I opened the door, removed the tongue depressor from the light switch, and slipped the key under the front driver's seat. I closed the door gently and walked back to my house. Inside, I locked the door, set the chain, and turned off all the lights. Upstairs in the bathroom, I cleaned my face and removed the gloves I had been wearing, flushing them one by one down the toilet. Feeling drained, I went into the bedroom and lay down, trying to clear my mind and get some rest. Was he finished? I thought. Wait! I heard, then a loud noise again, and something splattered all over me. I blinked, trying to see clearly, and then 4 loud sounds jolted me awake. I looked up and saw a man standing above me with a nasty grin. My eyes widened as I realized what had just happened. Before I could react, I saw something pointed right at me. All he said was, "You deserve this." And then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a room filled with soft white light, wearing a bright red dress that reached my feet. In front of me sat an older man in a brown robe at a large desk. The walls were covered with many pictures, over 100. Most were men, but there was one woman. I didn't recognize most of them, except for the woman, my doctor, and Marcus. I caught a glimpse of a small picture of James at the bottom corner, looking sad. I turned to look at the older man, and beside him was a slim girl with brown hair. He looked at me and asked, "Do you know why you are here?" "I don't even know where I am," I replied. "That doesn't matter. You are here because you need to face your past. You have a lot to answer for. We will see if any good outweighs the bad. So far, the only good we found was when you were 8. Do you remember returning the wallet of the old lady next door?" "Yes," I replied. "She just thanked me. No reward or anything." "That's how you treated her. She was surprised by your response, and that lost you all the good you had done. This is Sarah," he continued. "She is your guardian. She's on probation because she didn't help you as she should have. She wants another chance to improve and guide others, but isn't very fond of you." "But why did I die?" I asked. "That was decided by someone you hurt throughout your life." "What? Who do you think was responsible?" "Oh no, it's too late for regrets. You brought this upon yourself. He knows everything about you, and that led to your fate. He was heartbroken by your actions, and you did nothing to change that. He has to face his choices and find a way to make things right." "No," I cried out. "Do you have anything else to say?" I... Just then she disappeared in a puff of smoke. I lay in bed, turning uneasily as I began to grasp the impact of my actions. I thought I had gotten my revenge, but I felt an emptiness, longing for closure. At around 2 a.m., I finally fell asleep, but was woken up at 3 o'clock by a loud ringing of the doorbell and knocks on the door. I got up, put on my shoes, and went downstairs. "Just a minute," I called out, opening the door to see 2 police officers and a man I guessed was a detective standing there. They stepped inside, and the officers began looking around. "Do you mind if we check your place?" one officer asked. "No, go ahead. What's going on? Is it about my wife?" "Where is Sonia?" I asked, feeling panic rise in me. "Jones, check the garage. Smith, look through the rest of the house, with your permission, of course." Sure. What's happening, detective?" I was anxious as Jones headed to the garage and Smith walked upstairs. The detective showed me Sonia's driver's license from a plastic bag. "Is this your wife?" "Yes, that's Sonia." "Is this your wife?" he asked again, showing me a photo on his phone. "Oh my God!" I gasped and sank onto the sofa. "What happened?" "Your wife was killed, sir. Do you know where she was last night?" "She said she was going out with some friends, but she never came home." I put my head in my hands, feeling overwhelmed. Officer Jones returned from the garage and whispered to the detective. Officer Smith came back downstairs and said, "Nothing up there, Sarge." "Do you have a weapon, Mr. Tremaine?" the detective asked. "Yes, I have a Colt automatic." "Can we see it?" "Sure. It's in the gun safe." I went to the bookshelf and entered the combination for the safe. Officer Jones kept his weapon ready, and Officer Smith placed a hand on my shoulder, saying, "I'll get it." With gloves on, he opened the safe, took out the box holding the gun, and opened it. He checked the gun and said, "Hasn't been fired recently." "Didn't think so," the detective replied. He then asked, "Where were you between 11 p.m. last night and 2 a.m. this morning?" "I was right here, asleep." "Mr. Tremaine, I want to be honest with you. You're not really a suspect, but since you were her husband, you are a person of interest. I have to look into everything." "I should tell you, detective. I was in the process of divorcing her. She was going to be served papers on Monday." "That's important to know. Thanks for being open. Ginger thinks highly of you." He looked at me closely. "Is there anything else you need to share?" "No, detective. I didn't love her anymore. Our relationship ended, but I didn't hurt her. I had no idea anything would happen tonight. I guess I really am out of the loop." I looked down, feeling tears come to my eyes. "All right, we will be in touch," the detective said. "We need you to come down later today and identify the body. Are you going to be okay by yourself? Is there anyone you can call?" "No, I don't have anyone. Can you tell me more about what happened?" He looked at me and said, I'm not sure how much you want to know. She was involved in a party, and it seems it was recorded and posted online. There were also DVDs available. 10 other people were killed too, including 2 city council members, 1 state representative, the bar owner, 2 bouncers, and 4 others we don't know about. This is still early in the investigation. Just give us a few days and we'll update you. We'll return your belongings as soon as we can. Again, Mr. Tremaine, I'm really sorry for your loss, no matter the situation. The police left, and I locked up, then went upstairs to bed. As they walked to their cars, Jones and Smith updated the detective. The upstairs was tidy. The bed was disturbed, but nothing seemed off. The garage was organized. The hood of the Bronco was up, but the battery and starter had been taken out. The fan belts were taken off, and new ones were on the workbench. The truck, the Jaguar, and the motorcycle were cold to the touch. It looked like the oil had been drained at least a day ago, and the oil filter was removed. I don't think any of the vehicles were driven. I feel like we're missing something, but I can't put my finger on it. My instinct says he didn't do it, but maybe that's just me. They smiled and said they felt the same way. I went upstairs and laid down restless. I replayed the conversation and thought about the interactions between the 3 policemen and me. I hoped I had handled it as best as I could. I was unaware of who else had died, and some of what was revealed was surprising. I needed to get a copy of the police report once it was ready. The news about the website and the bar owner caught my attention. I would have to wait until the divorce papers and other legal matters were sorted out before thinking about any lawsuits. Eventually, I couldn't stay in bed any longer. I got up and made coffee. My mind was starting to process everything. I began to feel shaky when I realized what had happened and that I might have escaped serious consequences. Despite everything, I did have a conscience, and it was weighing heavily on me. I slumped into a chair at the kitchen island and started to cry, questioning what had become of my spirit and my life. I felt overwhelmed and didn't know what to do. At least I could keep my troubles hidden at work on Monday. I sat there until my coffee went cold. After a moment, I gathered myself and took a deep breath. I went back upstairs, inhaled deeply again, then took a hot shower followed by a cold rinse. I got out and dried off. I dressed in jeans and a shirt. I put on my sneakers and went downstairs. I made another cup of coffee and headed to the garage. I tried to figure out everything that had happened. Sonia was missing, and the money was moved, but that didn't really matter. It would only affect the other person when he found out he was out of cash. I needed to check in with Barbara to confirm our plans. I installed the new starter solenoid and fan belts, then replaced the drain plug and the oil pan. I added 7 quarts of oil and put on a new oil filter. Finally, I reconnected the battery, climbed in, and started the engine. The Bronco roared to life. I got out to check for leaks and everything looked fine. After shutting the hood, I got back inside. As the engine warmed up, I watched the gauges rise to their normal levels. I felt good having accomplished something. I turned off the engine, went to the kitchen, made a couple of sandwiches, grabbed 2 beers, and sat down to watch television. I switched on the news. It was about 10 a.m., and I watched the anchors cover a big story. 11 dead in bar incident. Investigation at a local bar. Possible connections to drugs. I had to decide when to inform the authorities about the ledger. I cleaned the living room, loaded my dishes into the dishwasher, and went back to the garage. As I got in the Bronco, I opened the garage door and saw 2 news trucks on the street setting up. Wow, that was quick, I thought. I eased onto the street as reporters rushed toward the trucks, calling out for comments. I drove to police headquarters, parked, and entered through a side door to avoid the crowd of reporters outside the main entrance. I asked for directions to the morgue and made my way downstairs to a cold, dim area. There, I found an officer who told me to wait while he contacted the front desk. A few minutes later, a detective arrived. "Mr. Tremaine?" he asked. I nodded, and he introduced himself as Detective Walsh. "Sergeant DeMarco said you would be coming in. I'm sorry for the circumstances," he said, attaching a visitor's badge to my shirt. "My condolences." He reached out his hand and I shook it, feeling a knot in my stomach. I didn't think it was for Sonia, but it would do if anyone noticed. "This way, sir," he said kindly. He led me down a hallway to a room with large windows and opened the door. A man, presumably the coroner, looked up from a table where a body lay. "Doctor, can we see Mrs. Tremaine?" Detective Walsh asked. "Of course," the man replied, turning toward a set of stainless steel cabinets. He opened a drawer about halfway down the row and took out a large sheet. "We have already looked at the body, sir, but you will only need to see the face." "Are you ready?" I nodded, and he pulled down the sheet. It was her, with 2 additional wounds on her forehead. "She was shot twice?" I asked. "Yes, sir, we have reports on 6 of the bodies. They were all shot with the same type of gun, probably a 9mm automatic. We also found some interesting things. She had a medical procedure about 15-16 years ago. Tests show she had a lot of ecstasy in her system, taken within the last 6 hours. She also had some past infections. You can get a copy of everything upstairs at Homicide. Here are her personal items. Please sign here." I signed and said, "Thank you, doctor." "Sorry for your loss, sir," he replied. I thanked him and turned to Det, Walsh following him out the doors. We took the elevator to the 4th floor to Homicide. He led me to a desk and gestured to a chair. "Okay, what do you want to know?" he asked. "What other details do you have?" I inquired. "I can't give you too much about the other victims, but I can tell you that she had relationships with multiple partners before her death." "Any idea who?" I asked. "As her husband and an attorney for her estate, I need this information." He looked at me for a moment, then with a hint of sadness said, "We can't identify many individuals, but forensics will provide you with the information you need." "What can you tell me about the other victims?" I asked. "It's all in the report names, addresses, and how the bodies were found. It should answer your questions." "One man, mister. Solange owned the bar." "Anyone else important?" "A few city council members, a judge, an assistant district attorney, and 2 notable businessmen. A lot to consider, counselor. Sorry about that." "It's okay, just like the donut jokes, detective. Can I get a copy of all the paperwork, please?" "Sure." He typed a few commands, and a printer began to work as we waited. "Do you know anyone who might want your wife dead?" he asked. "No, detective. I wasn't particularly fond of my wife. I'm sure you know I was planning to divorce her starting Monday. But I didn't want her dead. I'm being honest." "I understand, sir," he replied. "Where did you say she was going last night?" "She used to go out Friday nights with her friends, and I never thought anything was wrong." "Yeah, it turns out she often went out on those nights and had quite a few people who knew her." "People who knew her?" "Yes. The bar owner had at least 2 websites about her and what she did, and he even sold DVDs. Shocked, I asked if that information was in the report. "I don't think so, but the complete report isn't finished yet. Oh, by the way, here's your gun back." He opened his desk drawer and handed me my weapon. "Just sign this form and it's yours." I signed and placed my gun in my belt. "Thanks, detective. Could you call me when the reports are ready?" "I'll ask Terry to reach out to you. Again, I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." I left through the side door, got in my truck, and drove to Texas Roadhouse for a late lunch. I ordered a burger, fries, and a beer. After lunch, I headed home. I wasn't sure if the police wanted to look at her things, so I spent most of Saturday going through her belongings and her home office. I left the cash where it was and placed her file book on the bookshelf. I took 3 ledgers and put them in my bookcase. I began looking through her files and locked drawers. I had her keys, and under her desk I found 3 combinations for locks. I opened everything I could find but couldn't figure out any combination locks. I was surprised by what I discovered. There were mortgages, bank records, and details about safety deposit boxes in banks both nearby and far away, even in England. I found financial statements and spreadsheets. Soon after we got married, she had convinced me to file separate tax returns. I claimed the house, while she took numerous business deductions for 2 companies, Sonia Inc. and Sonia Enterprises LLC, labeled Events of a Personal Nature. That's where her earnings were kept. I was completely taken aback. Was I really so unaware of what she was doing? I wondered if I should get my mind checked. I leaned back in her chair, my thoughts racing. I picked up her desk phone and called Barbara Blaine's number. She picked up on the second ring. "This is your attorney. Can you talk?" "Yes," she replied. He just left for the office in a hurry. What happened? Someone beat me to it, I said, holding back some details. My wife has passed away. Do you still want to move forward with everything? Of course, Monday morning, right? Yes. A lot of changes are coming? Okay. I'll have the locks changed when he heads to work. You have a restraining order for me, right? Yes. It will start on Monday around 10. Great, she said. Barbara, if anything happens or you don't hear from him, call me right away, okay? Sure, I can do that. Talk to you later. I looked at all the papers, then got some boxes and filled one with tax returns, one with real estate records, one with bank statements, and added a file book. I loaded the boxes into the Bronco, changed my clothes, and went out to have dinner. The next morning, I was out early and made it to Mass. I was nervous about walking into the church, expecting something bad to happen, but nothing did. I took my usual seat at the back and bowed my head. I prayed hard, and soon I was crying. I didn't take communion because I wasn't feeling lucky, but I stayed after it ended. I thought maybe I should turn myself in. I figured the police had no leads and wouldn't solve this, but I didn't want to go to jail. I just wanted my life back. A soft voice in my mind told me I needed to make things right and that it would take a long time. I prayed, God, please help me. After a while, I got up to leave. On my way out, Father Jerome stopped me. You look troubled. Need to talk? Not today, Father. Can I get a rain check? Of course, but don't let it go too long. You won't like yourself. Got it, Padre. I thought I needed some normalcy, so I drove to Waffle House. I walked into the restaurant with more confidence than I felt. Well, 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 said Ginger. Long time no see. How you doing? I've been better, but I haven't been too much worse. Breakfast is on the way. You've probably been eating fast food. Let's get you back in shape. Everyone seemed to keep their distance. I guess my story was known. Yeah, you have a reputation that mixes sadness and pity. And you, Ginger? Jimmy, you have been through a lot. I know the real you, and you have nothing to be ashamed of. You are honest, trusting, and loyal. That's your only flaw. I looked into her eyes and felt uneasy. You don't know everything. And I don't need to, she replied calmly, holding my hands and looking into my eyes. The restaurant was very quiet. But that's between you and your God. The man I know needs help, and I'm here for you. What do you say? Thank you, Ginger. I don't know what to do. Just take your time, and when you're ready, we'll figure it out. Until then, here's someone else who cares about you. At that moment, her husband, Terry, walked up and sat down. Counselor, how are you doing? I'm doing okay, Sergeant. How is the case coming along? Slow. I got transferred to days to work on this investigation. I understand Detective Walsh helped you yesterday. Yes, he was a big help. Any updates? Not much I can say. The gun used in the crime is connected to 2 jewelry store thefts and a liquor store robbery. No one was killed, but there were a few injuries. I can't share more details because 1, you don't need to know, and 2, there isn't much else. I'm only telling you this since your wife was murdered. There is a lot of pressure to solve it because of important people involved, not just because of your wife. It's all right, Terry. I understand. We had breakfast, and he let me lean on his shoulder a bit. I felt like I was using their kindness and that it wasn't fair, but part of me tried to make sense of the terrible things I had done. The shady people who were also harmed gave me a tiny bit of comfort, but I still had a long way to go. I paid for their breakfast and drove home. I cleaned the Bronco, did some chores, and then packed her clothes to donate to the Salvation Army. I had a decent dinner and watched some football. The Giants lost again. The bad news just keeps coming. Monday I got up, took a shower, and shaved before heading out for breakfast. I went to the Waffle House. I might check on how the stock is doing if it's available. Ginger had my coffee ready, and my breakfast was on the way. Well, at least you look better today. Thanks, Mom, I replied with a smile. You add a touch of class to this place. Most mornings you wear a suit and tie. It really raises our spirits, she said as my waffles and hash browns arrived, followed by sausage and scrambled eggs. I hope that means I get a discount, I joked. Of course, we only charge you double like everyone else, Jimmy, she said. I laughed and started eating. Then, I noticed a beat-up Dodge minivan pull into the parking lot. A young woman got out. and a small blonde girl followed her. The girl looked to be about 3 or 4. "Oh dear, she's back again," whispered Ginger. "Huh?" I asked. "She comes in 3 or 4 times a week. I don't think she has money to spare, and that minivan seems to be hanging on by a thread." The young woman and the little girl came in and took a seat at the counter. She had striking dark red hair pulled back in a braid and bright green eyes. She was about 5'4", with long legs, and she had a pretty, though somewhat worn, look about her. She looked like I felt. She always orders coffee, 1 piece of toast for herself, and oatmeal and chocolate milk for the little girl. I was quietly observing them and noticed the mother looking around the parking lot. I signaled to Ginger, and as she approached with the coffee pot, I said, "Give them breakfast. Scrambled eggs and orange juice for the little girl, and a big breakfast for her mother with a glass of orange juice on the side. Put it on my bill. If they come in and I'm not here, do the same and charge me." Ginger looked at me with surprised eyes. "It's part of being the boss," I chuckled. "Oh, and do you have a small envelope?" She went to the cash register and returned with one. I pulled out some bills from my wallet. Meanwhile, I took out my smartphone and snapped a photo of her license plate and the little girl. "What are you planning, Jimmy?" Ginger asked. "She seems like she needs support." She looked me in the eye and said, "Be careful. You don't know her story, and you shouldn't make things harder for her." "Don't worry, I won't." I smiled back at Ginger, and for the first time in 4 weeks, I felt a little more human. As I headed out, I placed the bills in the envelope. I tucked it under the windshield wiper of her van as I walked to my Bronco. I got in and drove to work. It was going to be a long day. When I arrived at work, I parked in my spot and got the small cart we used to move boxes. I loaded it up with boxes and took them to the large conference room. Then I went to my office and waited for everyone to arrive. This is funny, I thought. I'm the first one here. Looking at my watch, I saw it was 8 a.m. I made some coffee and returned to my office, thinking about nothing. 45 minutes later, my coworker walked in and nearly jumped when she saw me sitting at my desk. "Coffee's ready," I said with a grin. She stared at me and went to the lunchroom. When she came back with her cup, she said, "There's coffee in the lunchroom." She looked surprised. "How long have you been here?" I laughed. "Only about 25 minutes. I wanted to find out why everyone comes in so early. It's not that special. I need Jerry, Jeremy, and Allison in the big conference room at 9:15. And you and Pete, too. Also, have Lainey and... what's the new girl's name?" "Cynthia?" she asked. "Yes, Cynthia. We will probably need them as well." "Got it, boss." She turned to get everything ready. I took a deep breath and gathered my thoughts. This had to be done. At 9:10, I walked into the conference room and took my seat. By 9:15, everyone was there. I asked Lainey to close the door, and it got really quiet. I began. "All right, here's the situation. I am closing the firm. You all have 2 weeks' notice." If it was quiet before, now it felt even more still. I couldn't help myself. I started to laugh. "Not funny," was the strong reply. "No, you're right, it wasn't, but I need to make sure everyone understands what's happening. Luckily, with 3 weeks until Thanksgiving and a slow period ahead, I've brought together my best folks in 3 key areas to assist me. You are all very skilled at what you do, and I trust your honesty. I value that a lot. You all have a new main client, me. If you have other work, please delegate it. This is your top priority for the next few weeks. Also, keep everything completely private. This will be more secretive than you can imagine. If you find anything that seems even a bit illegal, stop and come get me. Any questions so far?" A few looks were shared, but nobody spoke. "All right, this is about my wife's estate and legal matters. I don't know what you know about our situation, but I will answer your questions. Some answers might be tough to hear, but I promise they will be honest and legal. As far as I know, she died without a will. If we find out differently, we'll deal with it then. These boxes have her tax papers, property details, investments, and bank statements, both personal and business. Let's get started." Corey stood up, picked the box labeled Real Estate, took out the files, and began to look through them. He looked up and called for Lainey. "Could you get me a large map of the county and state? I need it to show roads and areas. Of course. She left the room. Jeremy had the box labeled bank statements and tax returns. Allison was already deep into the box for bank and investment statements, and her expression went from shock to pale. She began writing down notes quickly. "Cynthia," she called. Our newest intern came over, and Allison asked, "Can you go downstairs and get the tax law books, both state and federal? Bring them back here. Let the others know they can come up if they need anything." "Yes, ma'am." She hurried off. "Pete, come with me," I said. We went to the lunchroom, where I sent his phone pictures I had taken of a woman, a little girl, and the van's license plate. Find out everything about her, her child, her family, and anyone connected to them, but do it quietly. No one can find out. I suspect there are people looking for her, but they don't know where she is right now. I want to keep her location a secret. Understood? Got it, boss. Is this connected to the meeting in the conference room? Not directly. Maybe Janine's husband can ask around, but he needs to know the rules first. Understood. And check the value of the van. Sure. Anything else? Not at the moment. Lunchtime arrived, and the paralegals took orders for food. If my team thought they could play games for days, they were mistaken. The office was busy, and it felt good. At noon, Barbara Blaine called. She said her husband had been served with divorce papers, a claim of alienation, and a restraining order. A locksmith had secured her house. She was in touch with her lawyer, Giselle Anderson. She is my best divorce lawyer, I told her. I'm sure she'll help him understand that signing the papers is the best move. Let me know if you need anything. After we hung up, I called Giselle's office. Her assistant connected me to her. "Yes, Mr. Tremaine, how can I assist you?" she asked. She never called me boss, but it felt right when she said my name, much like how Ginger called me Jimmy. "How is the Blaine divorce going?" "I think he has other matters to consider. We served him at 9:30 this morning. I just heard from his lawyer. He wants to settle, probably by the end of the week." "Fantastic. Please take care of her. She was hurt like I was." "Of course, and I'm sorry about your wife. We'll support you. You don't need to worry." Even Giselle thinks I'm struggling. I ordered a sandwich and drinks for delivery. The rest of the afternoon was calm. At 6 p.m., I cleared my desk and left for the day. I stopped for takeout on the way home and got some drinks and food. Once home, I parked my truck and decided to drive my other car the next day. I enjoyed my meal and watched football as the Redskins played against the Dolphins. Maybe things were starting to look up. Tuesday morning was cloudy and windy. By the time I got to breakfast, it had started to rain. Ginger didn't see me until I reached the counter. She looked out and noticed I wasn't in my usual cars. "Did you walk here?" "No, I drove my ex-wife's car. It's not the car's fault she owned it." She laughed and set my coffee down. "Breakfast will take a little longer. You surprised me," she said. "That's okay. I came in early yesterday, so it's nice to take my time today." I sat there sipping my coffee, and as she passed by, I asked, "Hey, do you have any tomato juice?" "I love tomato juice." "Sure. Do you want it right away or with your food?" "Both," I replied. "Coming right up," she said. I relaxed a bit, and then the coffee was refilled and the tomato juice arrived. It's actually V8. We don't have tomato juice. Is that okay? "It'll do," I said. As I sat there, I noticed a Dodge minivan pull up and stop, as if the driver was looking for something. "How's our friend doing?" I asked Ginger, who paused to wipe her hands on a dish towel. She almost got upset when her and her daughter's food arrived. She looked around like she was confused, then said she hadn't ordered it and couldn't pay for it. The poor thing. I told her they were kind people who just wanted to help. By now, the van was parked, and the driver came in. She seemed nervous, looking around but not finding what she wanted. She found 2 seats and sat down. "Same plan, Ginger, and thank you for your help." Ginger looked at me and tilted her head slightly. "You're a good guy, Jimmy. Don't mess this up," she said as she walked away. What was that all about? I wondered. This kindness gave me a warm feeling, which I thought I could use after everything that had happened. I left a couple of 20s on the table and covered my bill with a nice tip. As I walked outside, I took a small envelope from my jacket pocket. I slipped the 2 20s into the envelope and placed it under the driver's side wiper blade of the van. After that, I got into my car and drove to a donut shop to pick up 3 dozen donuts before heading to work. I arrived like a hero. Really, the donuts were the stars. And I placed 2 dozen in the lunchroom and 1 dozen in the conference room. The conference room looked busy with papers, maps, and coffee cups everywhere. I stopped for coffee and made my way to my office. I sat down and started working. Janine peeked in and said, "Morning," before leaving for who knows where. I looked through the files on my desk. One was from Giselle, saying the other party had accepted the settlement and signed the forms. We would be in front of a judge on Thursday. Good. Then I'm ready to push for what we need. I set that file aside and continued going through the paperwork. The rest of the day was quiet, and I clocked out at 6:30. I drove home, grilled a steak, baked a potato, and warmed up some red cabbage. Dinner of champions. I watched some silly reality show. I slept through most of it. Caught the news and went to bed. On Wednesday, I got up, had breakfast, and went to work. I didn't go to Waffle House today. Instead, I made a stop at the donut shop. After that, I arrived at work and placed my treats in the lunchroom and the conference room. I grabbed a cup of coffee and headed to my office. The day went by quickly, and soon it was time to go home. As I drove by the Shell station, I noticed a van with its hood up. Steam was coming from it. I parked my truck next to the van, turned on my emergency lights, and got out. Inside, I saw a woman with a distant look in her eyes, holding her daughter tightly. I approached the van carefully and said, "Excuse me." She jumped and looked at me through the window. "I recognized you from Waffle House." "Please leave me alone. I don't know you," she replied. "Just a moment," I said. I took out my phone and called Ginger. It rang twice before she picked up. "Hello, who is this?" "It's Jimmy. Where are you?" "Terry just picked me up. We're on our way home. What's wrong?" "We have a problem. Our breakfast guest is stuck at the Shell station on 75 and 336. Do you know it?" "Yes, we do. Stay with her. We'll be there soon." I put my phone away and waited with her. After about 7 minutes, a large police car pulled up behind the van. Ginger jumped out and hurried over. She looked inside and nearly started crying. "Jillian, open the door, honey. It's Ginger from Waffle House. It's cold out here." I learned her name then. Terry came up and placed a hand on my shoulder. "How's it going, counselor?" he asked. "Doing as well as I can, Sergeant." Ginger was working her magic, and soon she had the door open and was holding the baby. Jillian stepped out as if she wanted to run away. Ginger took Jillian's hand and brought her to us. "You know my husband, Terry, and this is Mr. Tremaine, a very good friend." Jillian stared at us, and I nodded. "We're going to take you home for the night." "Yes, dear," Terry added, giving me a look that said, "Of course." I chuckled and asked if they needed help. "Grab their suitcases and put them in the trunk." Ginger helped them into the back seat while Terry and I moved their bags. There wasn't much to carry. Most of it was just a few boxes. I took out my phone again and dialed a speed dial number. After 2 rings, a man answered with a friendly voice. "Hello, Mr. Tremaine, what's up?" "Hernando, I need you to come to the Shell station on 75 and 336. There's a white Dodge minivan that needs a safe place for the night. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I hung up and turned to Terry. "I'll make sure her van is taken care of." "Now that's a good nickname," he replied with a smile. "Keep me updated." "Sure, let her know her things will be safe." "She'll be fine, counselor. Talk to you later." Hernando arrived with his flatbed truck, and soon it was loaded. He took it to his lot. I promised him I wouldn't say a word to anyone and mentioned he could contact Sergeant Kincaid if he needed to. He told me to just send him a bill. "Don't worry about it, my friend. For family, it's an honor. It's great to have good friends." As I made my way home, I couldn't help but think of the frightened girl with the bright eyes and red hair. Jillian, I thought, that name suits her. I wasn't ready for the thoughts that would hit me next. The next morning, I stretched in bed, wondering whether I should go to work. I sensed something important would happen today, so I got up, took a hot shower, and drank some orange juice before heading out. I started my Jaguar and drove off. When I arrived at the Waffle House, I walked into cheerful smiles from the customers and waitstaff. Ginger placed a special cup of coffee in front of me and said my breakfast was free and on its way. At the end of the counter, I noticed the 2 girls I had helped. The little one jumped up before her mother could stop her and walked over to me. "Are you Mr. Maine?" she asked. "I guess I am. Uncle Terry and Aunt Ginger say you are a really nice man." She looked serious and kept her gaze on me. "They say you saved us and took care of us until they came last night. I just wanted to make sure two sweet girls were okay, and it was getting chilly. Where is your big truck?" "It's at home, staying warm. I came in my Jaguar today." She thought about that, then hugged my leg tightly and rested her head against me. "Thank you, Mr. Maine." What was I supposed to do? I gently touched her head and leaned down to give her a quick kiss. Ginger giggled, her eyes sparkling with joy. Then her mother said, "Sonia, let the man be." I felt a chill when I heard that name. Everything shifted in the room, and Ginger could see the change in me. I stepped away from the little girl, quickly left a 20 on the counter, and walked out. "Jimmy!" she called after me, but I didn't look back. I started the car, backed out, and sped away from the lot. I reached work quickly, so fast that I forgot to pick up treats. Sitting in the parking lot, I struggled with the uneasy feeling in my stomach. Finally, I turned off the car and headed into the office. I spotted Neil, our apprentice, and called to him. I handed him $50 and asked him to get some donuts and kolaches. "Right away, boss," he replied. I realized I hadn't eaten anything, and just getting donuts wouldn't be enough. I grabbed some coffee and headed to my office. When the food came, I grabbed some kolaches and a donut and returned to my desk. Around 11 o'clock, I received a call from the conference room. I knew things were about to get interesting. I walked into the conference room holding my coffee cup and took a seat. "Okay, what's going on?" Corey asked. "We'll start with Jeremy, where the money is. Jeremy?" "Boss, we've gone through about 9,095% of the financial documents. We have concluded that everyone wants a big raise." I looked around at the pleased expressions on people's faces before turning back to Jeremy, who was smiling. "That was payback, boss," he said. I winced a little and replied, "Touché, please continue." "Everything we've found is legal and proper, maybe a bit questionable in nature, but all above board. The taxes are fine. As her legal spouse, everything is yours since she passed without a will. We couldn't find any other documents about her money or belongings, so it's all yours. We went ahead and filed the necessary forms, so it's nearly confirmed. The cash total is around $12 million. I whistled. "This covers cash, accounts, certificates of deposit, bonds, and several annuities." "Okay, what else is there?" I asked. "Corey," Jeremy prompted. "Boss, your former wife owned several properties. There are 2 condo developments, 3 shopping centers, a small housing project near Austin, a cottage in Bermuda, and a large house in France. There could be more properties in Europe, but we aren't sure since it's hard to get access to that information. Altogether, these properties are valued at $45 million. We've filed as her only legal heir. That's not an issue. All taxes are up to date. So far, this is just property. If you want to sell it for cash, the amount could be less depending on how quickly you want to move. The market is a bit slow right now." "Wow," I said. Corey then turned to Allison. "Boss, your wife had 2 independent companies, one of which was international. They were involved in marketing her properties and, other items. It was somewhat surprising, and I don't usually work in that market. I apologize for seeing some of the things I did." "That's all right, Allie. I appreciate your help." "Anyway, boss, she sold her items worldwide. The total value is about $17 million. She was partners with Victor Solange, who also owned the bar where she passed away. He was killed, too. They had insurance policies on each other worth $1 million each. There might be issues with collecting on these since the case is still open, but we are following up on it. Interestingly, the bar lost its liquor license because they didn't properly report the type of entertainment they offered. It's currently closed and under new management. I think we can find a way to take over the situation and set it right." I paused for a moment and noticed the eager expressions around me. "Thank you all for your great work. Here is my plan. If it's allowed, let's take all the cash and invest it in safe accounts. This way, we'll have money when we need it. Sell all the properties except for the cottage in Bermuda, the building in France, and the condos nearby. Check the vacancy rate, too. Let's keep everything legal and do this quickly." Go after the bar purchase and consider selling the land after clearing the building. Sell off all the furniture and supplies. Dispose of all inappropriate materials. Also, gather more information about the European side of this. Thanks again, everyone. Enjoy next week off. Pete, let's have a chat in my office. Janine, please join us. We moved to my office. Pete, what have you found out? The young woman's name is Jillian Karsten. She is 28 years old and tried to divorce her husband for mistreatment and emotional harm, but the case was dismissed. His family has some money and influence. Later, she went to the emergency room with various bruises. She stayed with her grandfather to heal, and when she was better, she left. She arrived here about 3 weeks ago. She graduated from the University of Mississippi with a degree in accounting and a minor in forensic accounting. She got married right after graduating, and her baby was born about 8.5 months later. However, she went to the hospital right after her wedding, claiming she was harmed. She had several bruises and a broken arm. She stated she had been assaulted. They did tests and took samples. Interestingly, her husband was away on a fishing trip when the baby was born and didn't even come to the hospital. "Oh, I already have my thoughts about him," I replied with a hint of sarcasm. "It's men like him that spoil it for the rest of you," Janine added. "One more thing. There is no father listed on the birth certificate, just unknown. Also, her grandfather is quite elderly and has a good amount of money. He owns a place called Ravenel Island, which has been found to have a lot of oil under it, easy to reach. His will states that everything goes to his granddaughter. If she stays with this man, he could benefit from it." I reflected. I believe we can assist this young lady. I called Giselle and asked her to come to my office. "Pete, I'm glad you're free because I have a mission for you. Go to Biloxi and see what else you can uncover." Just then, Giselle knocked and entered. I handed her what Pete had gathered on the divorce attempt and asked for her thoughts. "Well, this is Mississippi, and we are in Texas. Where is the young lady right now?" "She's nearby." "Well, if she can settle down and find a job, we might have a chance." She looked over some documents. "Honestly, I'd like to have a shot at meeting this person. What else can you find for me?" "We're on it, Giselle. Take this and start developing our plan. Janine, I need you to meet me for breakfast at Waffle House tomorrow morning at 7:30. We need to build her trust." "Okay, boss. Let's get to work, everyone." After lunch, I made a phone call. "Raptor Petroleum, Mr. Lodge's office, Nadine speaking. How can I help you?" "Yes, Nadine. This is James Tremaine. Can I speak with Mr. Lodge?" "Oh, Mr. Tremaine, of course. Please hold for a moment." A few seconds later, Sam Lodge was on the line. "James, how are you doing?" "I'm fine, Mr. Lodge. How about you? It's been a while." "I told you Mr. Lodge was my dad. Call me Sam." "Okay, Sam. I need a favor." "Anything you need, I'm here to help." "Have you heard of Ravenel Island?" "Sure, it's a small island in Mississippi. There's supposed to be a lot of oil not too deep underground." "Do you think you could arrange a deal with Mr. Ravenel to buy that island?" "I'm not sure. I hear he has plans for it for his granddaughter when he's gone. I doubt he wants a Texas oil company involved." "Why do you ask?" "We will be helping his granddaughter in a divorce case. Her husband is treating her poorly, and he's holding up the divorce because he wants the island when her grandfather passes." "What's his name?" "Clayton Karsten." "I know that family. They lack manners, but I still don't see how buying the land will help. He won't want to cut his granddaughter out of her share." "You're right. People will just think he sold it to you, however." He listened for a moment, laughed heartily, and said, "James, you are clever. That just might work. Let me get my lawyers involved. Call me when you're ready, and we'll take the Gulf Stream to present our offer." "Thank you, sir. I really appreciate your help. After what you did for my family, it's the least I can do. Keep me updated." "I will, sir. Thanks again." I called Barbara to check in. "Yes, everything is great. I deposited his settlement check this morning, and Giselle said all the papers are sorted. In 6 months, he will be just a bad memory." "Great. I plan to make his life difficult tomorrow. I just wanted to ensure you're okay." "Well, if you want to stop by and check on me, I won't mind. It still feels nice from the other night." I chuckled. "How about dinner some night? We can see where things go." "I owe you one. Just come by any time. Make him really feel it, James." I called Corey and said, "Let's take a drive. I want to check out those condos." "Sure thing, boss." He came to my office with all the papers we needed, and we drove the Jaguar to see the place. After a bit of driving, we turned into a small street. At the end, we found the development with 4 three-story buildings. We went to the rental office and asked to see the manager. The manager, Mr. Lane, welcomed us into his office. Mr. Lane, I'm Corey Rogers, attorney for the estate of Sonia Tremaine. You might know her as Sonia Inc., the main owner of this development. We're here to handle the transfer of ownership to her husband, Mr. James Tremaine. Here is the necessary paperwork. We have no issue with you continuing in your role, as you seem to be doing a great job. Corey handed the folder to Mr. Lane, who also received a business card. It looks like Mrs. Tremaine passed away without a will. Do you know of any lawyer she worked with? First, I'm sorry to hear about your wife. Under unusual circumstances, I must say. We didn't work with any law firm in the U.S., but we did occasionally hear from a firm in the U.K. I have no problem agreeing to your wishes informally, and as soon as we hear from the court, we can make it official. That works. It should only take about a week. We'd like to know about the availability of units. We have 4 units left out of a total of 24. There are 3 units on different floors of both buildings and 1 3-bedroom unit on the first floor with a garage attached in the front building. I nodded. We want to see that one, Corey said. Of course, right this way. I grabbed a brochure and tucked it into my jacket pocket. We drove to the building and walked to the front door. The apartment can also be accessed from the garage and comes with a garage door opener. It covers 2,500 square feet with 3 bedrooms, a washer and dryer, he said as he opened the front door. It has a security system and a front door camera. The rent is $2,500 per month with all utilities included. It's all electric and there's a pool, a gym, and a sauna. Wow, Corey remarked. I better not show this to Marie. It's nicer than our house. Marie is his wife and they have a little boy. We stepped inside and took a look around. It was very nice, spacious, and bright. It's set up for internet and cable. For an extra $200 a month, it can come fully furnished. If you're interested in this unit, we can strike a deal. It would save us from moving out all the furniture and painting. We'll take it as is, I said. $1,700 a month. How's that? I asked. We can work with that, sir. It helps our occupancy rate, and you're the boss, Mr. Lane replied. Please get the papers ready and send them to our office, I said. First and last payment? Yes, sir, to keep everything clear. Also, could you send over any information on that UK company? Would copies be enough, Corey? Of course, boss. Thanks, Mr. Lane. You've been very helpful. I appreciate it. My pleasure, sir. And again, I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. We got into the car and drove back to the office. Janine, ask Jeremy to come see me. Have we heard from Pete yet? No, sir. He probably just landed. Okay, keep me updated. Jeremy knocked on the doorframe, and I waved him in. Have a seat. I handed him Pete's report. What do you think of this young woman's qualifications? He started reading and whistled at one point. I see her transcripts. She had Professor Turner. That guy is really good. He looked at me. Are you thinking of replacing me, boss? Besides experience, she seems quite capable. Please try to contact this professor today and get his thoughts on her. Got it, boss. Janine, can you come in here for a moment? She appeared almost immediately and sat down. I want to bring her back and offer her a job. She deserves a chance, and we can give it to her. But I'll need everyone's support. So I was. Don't worry, boss. From what I've heard, she's in a tough spot. We'll make her feel welcome. And with you, me, and Ginger, we'll win her over. Maybe some of us care a little more, she added, raising an eyebrow and looking at me. I don't understand, Janine, I said, feeling a bit embarrassed. Sure, she replied. Just be on your best behavior. Yes, ma'am, I will. She returned to her desk, and I tried to focus on my work. Was I spending so much time on this because I liked the young woman? I was 6 years older than her. I was just trying to do the right thing. I looked at my watch and saw it was almost 4 o'clock. I decided to call Hernando. Garza Towing, Michael speaking. How can I help you? Miguel, how are you doing, buddy? Mr. Tremaine, how's it going? It's going, son. That's about all I can say. Is your dad around? No, sir, he's out on a job. Can I help you with something? Maybe. What can you tell me about the minivan your dad brought in? Do you know what's wrong with it? What isn't wrong with it? The engine is shot. It has 275,000 miles, the front-wheel drive has leaks, the transmission has leaks, and the tires are worn. You're looking at over $8,000 to fix it. And until we look deeper, we don't know about the transmission itself. Those types don't have a great reputation. I was afraid of that. Please ask your dad if he can move that vehicle to a safe spot, preferably inside. Of course, sir. We loaded it up last night when we finished unloading it. That's great, thanks. My mom wants to know when you will come for dinner. I'll let her know soon, I promise. How is Denise? Are you going to ask her to marry you? I heard there might be a press release about Christmas, but it's all a secret for now. You should hurry up before someone else does, I joked. Please don't say that. I'll tell Dad you called. Thanks, son. I hung up and got a call from Jeremy. Hey, Jer, what do you have? Professor Turner says if you don't hire her, you're making a mistake. She's really smart and does great work. He wanted her as a research assistant, but her husband didn't let her. Those are his words, not mine. He says she's very careful with her work. Good, Jeremy. I appreciate it. Can you be available for an interview tomorrow? Sure thing, boss. See you then. I called Terry Kincaid and spoke with the sergeant. Terry, do you have time to look at something I found related to the case? Of course, counselor. Should I come to see you, or will you come to my office? I'll come to your office. Please have Deta Walsh there, too. Sure, I don't mind messing up his weekend. See you soon? Sounds good. I stood up and stopped at Janine's desk on my way out. I'm heading to police headquarters if anyone needs me. I'll likely go home from there. Okay, boss. Be careful, she replied. 20 minutes later, I was heading to Terry's office on the 4th floor of police headquarters. I found his office and entered, with Date Walsh right behind me. What can we do for you, counselor? I have something important for you to see. I found this behind Sonia's college books. As soon as I saw it, I brought it here and locked it in my safe. It's been there since Monday. This is the first chance I had to get to you. I handed him the book. He took it carefully and opened it. Walsh also put on gloves and leaned in to look over Terry's shoulder. Wow! Exclaimed Art Walsh. I started explaining what I found. The passport belongs to her. It's the real one. There's a plan for a trip on Valentine's Day next year to Mexico City for her and Marcus Blaine, using their real names. From there, they will use fake information with new passports. They will go to Argentina under the names Mr. and Mrs. Garcia. Then they will travel from Buenos Aires to Johannesburg, South Africa, with new Argentinian passports as Mr. and Mrs. Kreitzman. From Johannesburg, they will head to Madagascar as Mr. and Mrs. von Talman, again with new passports. Once they arrive in Madagascar, they have plans to go to the Seychelles. But she also has a single passport in her name, Diane Vorton. It's a new Madagascar passport. She also has a reservation to Cairo, Egypt, and a new Egyptian passport. There is also a reservation for Lyons, France, under the name Hoda O'Cedar. After that, she disappears. Wow, Terry exclaims this time. For the last 2 months, she kept mentioning a big surprise for Valentine's Day, but she didn't sound excited about it. Now, look at this. These spreadsheets show 11 bank accounts with a total of $23 million. They are in about 8 banks worldwide. The sheets are labeled Sonia's copies, and there are duplicates marked Marcus's copies. Here is her laptop. I can't access it because it's locked. I suspect there are some concerning entries related to her job. Terry and Art exchanged worried looks. Motive. They both thought. Counselor, we need to bring in the feds. This is bigger than we realized. I asked, do you need me? No, just stay available in case we have questions. I'm heading home. I might go out for dinner tonight. You have my number. Okay, just keep your phone on. I'll probably see you for breakfast tomorrow. Count on it. As I walked to my car, I called Barbara Blaine. Hey, want to have dinner? Maybe we can settle that rain check? Be here in 1 hour and 45 minutes, she replied. I hurried home, took a shower, changed, and arrived at her house an hour and a half later. When I rang the doorbell, she opened the door and smiled. She wore a lovely sea green dress that showed off her figure. She had on stylish black heels and matching green stockings, and her hair was elegantly styled. "Where are we going?" she asked playfully. Seafood, steak, or Italian? Your choice. This is a celebration, just for tonight. Then we go our separate ways," she said firmly. "Sounds good. I could use a treat." She chose seafood, specifically the fanciest seafood restaurant in town. I opened the car door for her and admired how she slipped into the passenger seat. "Where are the kids?" I asked casually. "Not at home. They're with their grandparents for the weekend. But this will only be for tonight. I have other plans for the rest of the weekend. No hard feelings." "None at all." I updated her on what was planned for the next week regarding the situation with her ex. Wow, they really planned to make things hard for us, didn't they? Yeah, it looks that way. We arrived at the Sea Ray, the nicest seafood restaurant in Texas. The valet opened her door, and she stepped out, giving a lovely display. We entered the restaurant, and the hostess seated us at a small private table. No wonder he seemed uninterested in the financial split and visitations. He wasn't planning to deal with any of it, I said. "That sounds about right," I replied. She'd been dropping hints over the past month about Valentine's Day, and I had no idea what she was planning until I stumbled upon her ledger. I guess I've always been too trusting, I thought to myself. "Well, tonight is about no surprises, just great food and enjoying each other's company," I said as we sat down. We ordered drinks and dinner. She chose shrimp, crab cakes, and lobster. I opted for a ribeye steak with rock lobster and a side of oysters. The meal was delightful and the atmosphere was light, helped along by just the right amount of wine. We ended with sorbets and coffee, savoring the pleasant end to the meal. I paid the check and we left arm in arm. My phone buzzed as we stepped outside. "Hello?" I answered. "Counselor, can you come to my office at 11 o'clock Monday morning?" It was Sergeant Terry Kincaid. "It's a little unnerving that I know your voice without an introduction," I joked. He chuckled. "Things have moved quickly over the past few hours, and we need to talk." "No problem, Sergeant. I'll be there," I said before ending the call and turning my attention back to my dinner companion. "Shall we go somewhere for dessert?" I asked with a smile. "I thought you'd never ask," she replied warmly. The valet brought the car around and we headed to her place. The evening breeze accompanied the quiet rustle of her dress as we drove, the night feeling calm and full of promise. When we arrived, I got out and opened her door. She smiled, her eyes sparkling under the porch light. "Shall we?" she asked softly, motioning toward the house. We walked to the door, and she opened it, letting us inside. As I closed the door behind me, she turned and wrapped her arms around me in an embrace that felt both warm and inviting. "I have to admit," she said with a smile, "when I met you at the gala, I couldn't understand why your wife would ever leave you. But then again, people can be full of surprises." I shared a little about my past, mentioning some of the ups and downs of my marriage. She listened intently, a thoughtful look crossing her face. "That's tough," she said, shaking her head. "Sometimes people don't realize what they have until it's gone." We sat down, letting the evening drift into quieter, more personal conversations. There was a shared sense of understanding and mutual respect that made the night feel meaningful. The room was quiet as we moved together, sharing a moment of connection. She laughed softly as I guided her toward the master bedroom, where the dim light created a warm and calm atmosphere. I placed her gently on the bed, and we exchanged easy smiles as we made ourselves comfortable. The evening felt lighthearted as we talked, sharing stories and laughter that filled the room with warmth. The mood shifted to something deeper, but we kept things playful, letting the moment linger. She teased me about how much time had passed since either of us had felt this close to someone, and we both laughed at how life sometimes keeps people too busy to enjoy these simple human connections. As we lay side by side, the conversation turned to dreams, old memories, and what the future might hold. She spoke about her kids and how much joy they brought her, and I shared a few stories of my own. It was a comforting moment, one of mutual understanding and a reminder of how important small, meaningful exchanges can be. We stayed up talking late into the night, letting the world outside fade away for a while. The connection between us deepened, but we kept the moment gentle and filled with lightheartedness. Eventually, the quiet hum of the evening lulled us into a peaceful sense of contentment. The evening carried on with a sense of comfort and closeness. We shared a moment of laughter and warmth, appreciating the rare opportunity to let go of the outside world and just enjoy each other's company. The hours passed as we talked about life, dreams, and the challenges we'd faced. Later, we drifted into a peaceful rest, the kind that comes after a long and meaningful day. The quiet calm of the night wrapped around us, and it felt as though the worries of the world had paused, if only for a while. In the early hours of the morning, we woke up slowly, still feeling the calm from earlier. We shared a brief moment of lightheartedness before deciding to freshen up. The warmth of the shower provided a refreshing start, clearing away the remnants of sleep and leaving us ready to face the new day. Before leaving, I thanked her for the evening, grateful for the shared understanding and the comfort of her presence. She smiled and expressed her gratitude as well, her words full of sincerity. As I stepped outside and made my way back home, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The next day would bring new challenges, but I was determined to help this young woman find stability and a path forward. Hey everyone! Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the exciting stories we have coming up. What do you think about the characters in this story? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.